Hello, everyone. Omni-sensei here with What If I Was Reborn as YUJI Itadori, Part 3. If you enjoy this content, please smash the like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description. I hope you enjoy listening to it.
Physical combat, an essential skill for every jujitsu sorcerer. Until a few months ago, Mark couldn't claim to be very skilled in it. Yes, he used to train in self-defense with his wife and could say he'd hold his own in a fight. But that was far from enough, not in this world. That's why he was pleased when he received Itadori's memories. The boy was simply obsessed with martial arts, his favorite being Taito, which he practiced through video lessons. Mixing his knowledge of self-defense with the martial knowledge of the original Itadori, he felt confident enough to say he would rarely lose in a fistfight. And his skill only increased over time, as he was able to actively train with Gojo and later with Maki. Itadori didn't disregard weapons, but he knew his talents didn't lie in them. His fists were his greatest weapons. Choso gasped when a fist pierced his defense, his ribcage being hit with such force that it made his whole body tremble for a moment. "Damn it," he growled, and turning to his attacker, he tried to counter with a punch. But before he could complete his move, Itadori was quick to grab his wrist, pulling it down and hitting his face with a knee strike. The blow was precise, and a crack sounded, blood spurting from the death painting's nose as his head was sent back. But this only served to enrage him further, a vein bulging in his forehead as a blood blade appeared in his hand. Itadori noticing this and jumping back as an attack threatened to slash his throat. Choso frowned at missing, but saw it as an opportunity to gain distance. He quickly realized that close combat was Itadori's specialty, besides the boy having powerful reinforcement. He could still feel every hit he received, and even though they were few, they were strong enough for him to realize he couldn't take many more. He needed to gain distance and use piercing blood to gain an advantage. A single solid hit was all he needed to turn the tide. But Itadori seemed to have realized this much earlier. The moment Choso took a step intending to retreat, Itadori advanced, reaching him and immediately grabbing his wrist, holding the blade. Choso growled at this, and just as he was about to try and break free, a headbutt hit him with enough force to crush his nose, his legs giving way as he fell to his knees. "Bastard!" Choso cursed as some blood flew from his mouth. "This isn't over." And declaring firmly, Itadori widened his eyes as he felt the hairs on his neck stand up, turning to see 3 blood orbs floating behind him. Supernova. The blood orbs exploded, blood being thrown in all directions like bullets. Itadori, close enough, gritted his teeth as he felt his back being hit. "I didn't see that," he complained, a nervous smile appearing on his lips as he quickly stepped back. But Choso didn't want to let this opportunity pass, advancing while bringing his hands together. Piercing blood. Itadori alerted himself, but narrowed his eyes when he noticed something. He can't fire without preparing a blood orb, it's a trap. Noticing this quickly, Itadori advanced, unexpectedly to Choso, who was unable to raise his arms quickly enough to block a solid punch to his face. Choso's body was abruptly pushed to the ground by the attack, but Itadori was surprised when the man stopped his fall purely with the strength of his legs. "Damn you!" Choso roared, and got up throwing a punch at Itadori, the young sorcerer promptly blocking. "I'll kill you, for my brothers." Choso quickly grabbed the boy's wrist, pulling it and hitting his defense with an elbow strike strong enough to push him back. His strength increased? Itadori questioned, noticing how the blood tattoo on Choso's face seemed to change. "I don't feel any change in the flow of his cursed energy, so it must be an enhancement through blood." "Damn, I'd love to learn how to do that." Taking a stance, Itadori regulated his breathing, a movement made by countless martial artists with the intention of calming their minds. Choso, seeing this, gritted his teeth while forming some blood orbs, which floated around his body. The fight seemed to be about to reach its climax. Choso advanced, being the first to attack with a kick, which Itadori avoided by stepping back. With the approach, the death painting brought his hands together, but a kick to his hands left them pointing upwards, Itadori taking advantage of this to continue with a powerful punch that hit Choso's solar plexus squarely, making him vomit blood. Choso's eyes widened for a moment, his body falling forward as a sign of losing consciousness. Itadori saw this as an opportunity to finish the fight right there, and advancing, he didn't think twice about attacking with a fist. But this proved to be a rash decision. As to the boy's surprise, Choso regained control of his body and dodged the attack at the last second, hitting the sorcerer with a full elbow strike. He tricked me. Itadori felt his jaw tremble with the impact, his vision blurring for a moment. This opportune moment, which Choso used to move to his side, his hands together while the blood in his palms condensed in a matter of seconds. Apologize to my brothers when you see them. The two stared at each other for a few seconds, a deadly silence hanging between them, while Choso, who seemed determined to fire a fatal attack moments before, now just kept his hands pointed at Itadori. The reason for this? What was that? Choso questioned himself, the blood rising in his throat making him vomit. An intense pain, an inexplicable pain, that made Choso freeze seconds before firing his attack. Did he hit me? Choso slowly moved his gaze downwards, noticing the blood flowing from a completely new wound in his stomach, his eyes landing on Itadori's lowered fist, which was dripping blood. That was... Choso widened his eyes, his lips trembling as he seemed to unravel the situation. It can't be. Boom. But while he seemed lost in thought, Itadori didn't seem to care about his internal confusion, his fist hitting Choso's face with enough force to send him flying towards the bathroom. That was close. Itadori felt the sweat trickle down his forehead. That was a shot in the dark. If it didn't work, there was a good chance he would have pierced my head. Itadori shook his shoulder, a relieved sigh escaping his lips. In the end, everything had turned out positively for him because he knew blood manipulation. If it weren't for that, he couldn't say he would have come out so unscathed. Itadori crossed his arms, his gaze turning to the bathroom. Now, what should he do about Choso? Itadori didn't know what triggered the false memories and didn't know if it would still happen. That would be a shame. Choso was a good person, at least according to what he remembered from the story. But Itadori wasn't willing to have his liver pierced just to have him as an ally. What would happen from this moment? He would leave to fate. If later, Choso saw him as a brother, he would be satisfied, but if not, he wouldn't hesitate to kill him. Did he win? Yes, it seemed so. Itadori raised his head in alert as two voices reached his ears, turning to see what seemed like two girls watching him from the corner of a hallway. He raised an eyebrow at this, trying to remember their faces. If I'm not mistaken, they are Gitoa's adopted daughters. He observed them as they both revealed themselves completely, Itadori not intimidated as he noticed one of them pulling out a cell phone. Their cursed energy is weak, I don't think I need to worry. What do you two want? He asked directly, there was no point in wasting time with small talk. He observed as the blonde, Nanako, frowned in irritation. It's not you we want to talk to. Itadori raised an eyebrow in curiosity, crossing his arms nonchalantly. Oh, and who would that be? Sukuna. They both spoke in unison, and Itadori couldn't help but fall silent when that name left their mouths, his eyes narrowing as he observed them silently. Is this a joke? Itadori seemed incredulous for a moment. What could you possibly want with him? They both seemed hesitant for a moment, but Nanako was the first to speak. We want him to kill the one who stole Master Gitoa's body. Itadori pondered over that response for a moment, his mind focusing on Kenjaku for a moment, before remembering Sukuna. Sukuna didn't do favors, there was no price that could make him do something for someone. He was a monster, and monsters didn't make deals. He could understand them, since they didn't know the King of Curses, but Itadori was connected to Sukuna, and his evil was great enough for him to feel through the soul connection. With a sigh, Itadori took a step forward, seeming surprised when Nanako pointed the cell phone in his direction. "Look, I'm sorry to say this, but it doesn't matter what you have to offer. Sukuna doesn't care about debts, and he doesn't care about favors. He would kill you both without a second thought." The two seemed to consider his words, turning to each other as if thinking the same thing. And he would deny even this? Yes. Catching them by surprise, Itadori seemed to anticipate what they would show, Nanako displaying one of Sukuna's fingers. He doesn't care if it's 1 or 10 fingers. Sukuna won't follow orders, especially not from two girls. Don't expect this to save you from being sliced into millions of pieces. But I think I can help you both. Jogo observed the charred bodies of the sorcerers around him. Seeing two of them struggling to stay alive made him feel satisfied with himself. He felt nothing but disgust toward them, but they were responsible for Dagon's death, so he couldn't help but feel happy to avenge his comrade. But hearing the female among them struggle to breathe, he frowned in annoyance. Dagon's death had been swift, the least he could do was end them quickly. Raising his hand, Jogo let the fire dance between his fingers, ready to end the sorcerer's suffering once and for all. But before he could launch his attack, his eyes widened as a pressure fell on his shoulders, sweat trickling down his forehead. That overwhelming presence, he could tell whose it was. Sukuna. No, Sukuna's fingers. Someone had released one of the fingers somewhere in the station. This was strange, after all, he was the one who was supposed to possess the fingers. He needed to find out what was happening. Megumi didn't have time to worry about what was happening at Shibuya Station. Because he had something more pressing to deal with at the moment. A crazed killer hunting him. Leaping into an alley seconds before a blow could pierce his head, Megumi felt cold sweat trickle down his neck, a sigh escaping his lips as he quickly moved to the end of the alley. This guy is too strong. He regulated his breathing, his eyes landing on the black-eyed man watching him with indifference. He withstood my new, and didn't even care about the rabbit swarm. At this point, I believe I have no advantage. Seeing the man prepare his sharp staff, which had once been the powerful playful cloud weapon, Megumi readied himself. At this point, he knew the only way to land a solid attack would be a suicidal strategy, meaning taking a hit and using that moment to counterattack. But if he missed by a single inch, there was a high chance he would end up dead, considering the strength his opponent had shown. Damn. He needed to think, he needed to find a way out of this situation. Think. He hammered into his head, his eyes narrowing as the man seemed to prepare to advance. You use your shadow as a medium, don't you? As Megumi struggled to think of something under that crushing tension, his eyes widened as something came to him, his mind flashing back to a few days before. One of the training days he had with Itadori. In the end, it all comes down to shadows. Your technique uses the shadow as a medium to summon the Shikigami. That's the main characteristic of the technique, right? Megumi nodded at his words, Itadori rubbing his chin with a thoughtful expression. But does that really have to be its main characteristic? Megumi blinked at that question, clearly confused. What do you mean? When you showed me your domain, you demonstrated a very interesting technique, a shadow clone. Itadori crossed his arms, looking up as if recalling the training. Tell me, Fushiguro. Are you a Shikigami? Megumi remained silent, still not understanding where Itadori was going with this. Yuji noticed this and couldn't help but sigh in disappointment. Megumi had potential, but his closed mind prevented him from seeing beyond what was already established. Can't you see? Summoning isn't the only predominant factor of your technique. Itadori stepped closer, standing just in front of Megumi. You focus so much on summoning, you forget you can literally manipulate shadows. Megumi seemed to want to argue with that, but Itadori didn't seem finished. What stops you from creating weapons? From blinding your opponents with shadows? I can understand you don't have full control over the shadows around you, but imagine if you did? The night would basically be your domain, never thought about that? Megumi seemed surprised by those words, a spark of recognition appearing in his eyes, as if he had just understood. Don't limit yourself to what you already know, be a little creative. In that dark alley, Megumi opened his eyes in recognition, his eyes lifting to face his opponent, who was on the verge of advancing. The night is my domain. Megumi clasped his hands together, his eyes closing as cursed energy began to oscillate around his body. I get it now. Opening his eyes, Megumi displayed a confident smile, the cursed energy in his body expanding in all directions, causing a change in the environment that his opponent noticed immediately. Exclamation point. Toji became alert as the surroundings darkened even more, his eyes narrowing as he noticed his opponent disappearing into the darkness. He couldn't think clearly, but his instincts roared at him. He needed to move. About to move, Toji raised an eyebrow as he felt his foot sink, his eyes moving downward to see the ground turning into a black fluid. He growled at this, his eyes narrowing as he noticed the fluid bubbling. He leaped backward as a snake's head exploded from the darkness beneath his feet, threatening to swallow him whole. But he wasn't fazed by this, his fist striking the top of the snake's head and making it disappear into shadows. Toji saw this in alert, his body spinning quickly as his instincts screamed for him to move, his eyes landing on a Megumi right behind him about to strike him with his sword. Now! The boy shouted, but Toji just shrugged it off as he pierced his head before his attack could land. But again, Toji found himself surprised as the boy crumbled into shadows, his eyes widening in alert the moment the ground beneath his feet bubbled. And catching him off guard, Megumi emerged from the ground, his sword grazing the man's neck before he blasted backward. Damn it! Megumi cursed, the alley's lighting returning to normal. That was my best chance. Megumi was breathing heavily, exhaustion catching up to him due to his excessive use of cursed energy. Manipulating the shadows around doesn't consume as much cursed energy as expanding my domain, but my reserves were already low. He sighed, his eyes narrowing as he prepared himself. Damn it, I'm screwed. Toji observed the boy in silence, his eyes opening slightly as his mind, until then taken by the desire to fight, flashed to moments he preferred not to remember from when he was alive. Take care of my kid, alright? His lips pressed together, the darkness in his eyes fading as consciousness seemed to return to him. Hey, what's your name? And he suddenly asked, which confused Megumi for a moment. Fushiguro. Toji smiled at this. Not Zenin, then? Lucky you, kid. Why are we trusting him? In the midst of the city's silent streets, Mimiko and Nanako were carrying an unconscious Choso. Itadori had asked them to take him to a safe place and protect him until he woke up. Mimiko didn't trust him, and she didn't hide her distrust. Because we have no choice, he's our best bet to recover Master Gitoa's body. But Nanako wasn't in the mood to argue. She knew Itadori was a jujutsu sorcerer, so it was normal for them to distrust him, but at this point, they couldn't go against the man who stole Sugiru's body alone. For everyone to achieve their own goals, they needed to unite. Do you think he will defeat that curse? Mimiko questioned. Nanako was silent for a moment, her head turning to the station. If he doesn't win, then our contract will have been in vain. At the station, Itadori observed the Sukuna fingers he had in hand, an indifferent look on his face. 2 fingers. That was what he thought, his gaze perceiving the cursed energy exploding wildly from the cursed objects. He had noticed that every time he devoured the fingers, a portion of Sukuna's energy was absorbed by his body, enhancing his own reserves. He couldn't measure it precisely, but if he had to guess, he'd say he took about 10% of the total energy from one of the fingers. But as time went on, he felt his reserves increasing, which meant that little by little, his reserves were adapting to match Sukuna's. He could say that over time, he would reach Sukuna's level in terms of cursed energy. But his time was running out. He needed to increase his power quickly, or everything would be in vain. So, looking at those 2 fingers, he didn't hesitate to devour them all at once. Feeling the cursed energy course through his body, Itadori gritted his teeth as he struggled to maintain control. With each finger devoured, Sukuna's soul recovered one of its fragments, which naturally made him stronger. This way, Sukuna could fight for control, but it didn't mean he could win the struggle. Itadori, besides being created with the sole purpose of serving as a prison for Sukuna, had a different soul. Even if Sukuna was the king of curses, and even if he was the strongest, his soul simply couldn't compete with Itadori's soul. The soul was something that couldn't be strengthened, but Itadori was an exception to this rule. Because he was an anomaly in this world. Feeling his body return to normal, Itadori sighed in satisfaction, a confident smile appearing on his lips as he felt his reserves expand. "That's great," he murmured, a quick laugh escaping his lips. Clap. Opening his eyes when the sound of clapping reached his ears, Itadori turned with an excited smile. "Todo!" he exclaimed upon seeing his friend, Todo, approaching while carrying a blonde by his hair. "My brother!" The sorcerer released the blonde man, advancing and hugging Itadori. "I was looking for you." Itadori laughed at this, pulling away from the hug and resting his gaze on the blonde figure on the ground. "Is it him?" Todo blinked, turning with a furrowed brow. "Yes, this idiot was attacking all the managers around the barrier. If I had taken too long, maybe he would have killed many of them." Todo crossed his arms while shaking his head in discontent. "I couldn't care less what you do with him, but I'm curious." Itadori remained silent, approaching the unconscious blonde and crouching in front of him. And with a mischievous smile, he turned to face Todo. "You'll see." Jogo ran through the station with urgency. His body and face emitted irritation. The reason for this was that as quickly as Sukuna's energy had been released, it had disappeared, which in his eyes could only mean that Itadori Yuji had devoured the finger. This could mean something bad, so he couldn't waste any more time. He needed to find Sukuna's vessel as quickly as possible. Widening his eyes when he turned the corner, Jogo was surprised by the sight before his eyes. This. Seeing the huge black wall in front of him, he narrowed his eyes in suspicion. A domain barrier? He was confused. Not many people in Shibuya were capable of expanding a domain, especially with Dagon's death, limiting it to only Jogo, Mahito, and Gito. Mahito and Gito shouldn't be in this part of the station, so it had to be someone from outside. Jogo found this too suspicious to ignore. "I'll figure this out now." Letting the flames dance on his fingers, he retracted his arm in anticipation, ready to destroy the barrier. Flap. But before he could complete his move, his eyes widened as the vision before his eyes was distorted, blinking as he noticed he was no longer in the same place. What was that? He turned, seeing that he was now facing away from the barrier. "Hey!" But as he seemed to want answers, he turned when a voice called, his eyes landing on a tall, muscular human. "My brother is busy at the moment, so don't interfere, alright?" What the hell was going on? Observing that man, Jogo quickly concluded that he was a sorcerer. His puffed chest, his confident expression, and his meticulously controlled cursed energy, all of this was indicative. Jogo could tell through these aspects that the sorcerer in front of him must be strong. But definitely not stronger than him. Insolent humans, just get out of my way. And for this reason, he didn't want to waste time with someone so insignificant, his hand raising as flames threatened to explode at any moment. Clap. But as he seemed about to attack, his eyes widened in surprise when the vision before his eyes changed, his head turning in time to see a fist inches from his face. Boom! Jogo flew as the impact violently hit his face, his momentum halted by his feet as he skillfully regained control of his body. This again? A small bruise appeared on the curse's jaw, disappearing as quickly as it appeared. He's changing my position. How? Jogo observed Todo cautiously, his teeth clenched as he seemed to grow frustrated. A truly irritating technique. Raising his hand again and pointing at the sorcerer, Jogo narrowed his eyes, soon noticing how Todo brought his hands together in anticipation. But I think I figured out the trick. With a disdainful smile, Jogo let the flames dance across his fingers. This time, I'll hit. Todo's eyes widened as he noticed Jogo about to attack, clapping his hands once more and swapping positions between the two. But as he seemed confident in escaping the attack, he was surprised when the curse advanced towards him seconds after the switch. He figured it out. Todo went on high alert, and imbuing his body with cursed energy, he prepared as the curse closed the distance. He's fast. One down. Reaching the man, Jogo displayed a disdainful smile as he touched his abdomen. Clap. But he was surprised when he saw the man disappear in the blink of an eye, his teeth clenching as a kick struck the top of his head with enough force to push him to the ground. Todo took this moment to retreat, cold sweat running down his forehead as he remained on guard. Todo had realized beforehand that the curse in front of him was powerful, but with this brief exchange between them, he noticed that the gap between them was even greater than he had expected. His instincts screamed at him, and this made him understand that just one hit would be enough to end everything. He needed to be cautious, or all his effort could be destroyed due to a single slip. Todo smiled at this, and wiping the sweat from his face, he puffed out his chest confidently as the curse stood up without showing much damage. Damn! Jogo cursed, turning to face Todo with irritation. And the sorcerer, seeing this, just shrugged confidently. Let's dance, Volcano Head. Todo leaped as a wave of flames threatened to engulf him, his eyes widening in surprise as he noticed the overwhelming heat emanating from the flames. But he didn't have time to pay attention to how dangerous they were, as he noticed the curse exploding in his direction. He's extremely fast. Todo clapped his hands seconds before a fist hit his head, a nervous smile spreading across his lips. Stop running, damn it. Jogo growled, turning to attack, his teeth clenched as Todo kicked his stomach. Clap. But before the curse could fly back, Todo quickly swapped their positions, hitting him with an elbow in succession. But this only served to annoy Jogo, who tried to touch him with the intention of incinerating him. Not so fast. But Todo was quick to clap his hands, swapping their positions again and hitting the curse's back with a powerful punch that sent him flying. Enough! Jogo roared as he planted his feet on the ground, turning and exploding toward Todo like a bullet. The sorcerer narrowed his eyes at this, and immediately brought his hands together in anticipation. I'll wait for the switch. Closing in, Jogo clenched his fists, a disdainful smile on his lips. And strike at the exact moment. With this strategy in mind, Jogo closed the distance between them, his eyes following the sorcerer's hands. Clap. And the instant the clap sounded, he immediately turned and punched. But he seemed surprised when he didn't notice his vision change as it had before. Boom! Jogo gasped as a fist hit his ribs squarely, his teeth clenching in irritation as he quickly retreated. You seem to have realized that every time I clap, my technique activates. But that only works as an activation mechanism, I don't need to switch every time I clap. Todo explained confidently, cursed energy dancing around his fist. That's my boogie woogie. Jogo listened in silence, a sigh escaping his lips as he wiped the saliva from his lips. You have a very irritating technique, Jujutsu sorcerer. And bringing his hands together, Jogo gave a disdainful smile, causing Todo to go on alert. But I can see there's a limit you can't surpass with such a weak technique. Bending down, Todo was surprised when he saw the curse place his hands on the ground. And that limit is me. Damn. Clap. Feeling the heat rise beneath his feet, Todo disappeared seconds before a magma explosion, narrowly escaping a painful death. But Jogo couldn't care less about that. After all, the sorcerer wasn't his true target, but rather, the domain barrier that had stood throughout their entire confrontation. Jogo smiled as he saw the magma engulf the barrier at once, the barrier cracking before finally shattering, a strong icy wind spreading for a moment before being swallowed by the infernal heat. Hey! But expecting the magma to engulf whoever was responsible for the barrier, he opened his eyes in confusion when a voice came from beside him. I was dealing with some internal issues before you interrupted me. Turning, Jogo's expression filled with recognition as he saw the young face of a boy watching him with irritation. How do you intend to compensate me, curse? Itadori Yuji had just entered the battle, but something had changed in his eyes. Isn't that Marcus Walker himself, in the flesh? In a busy bar, Marcus found himself focused on his own drink as he rested his elbows on the counter. It was a recurring habit for him, to go out for a cold drink after a tiring day of work and studies. At least, he believed this was better than following his friend's suggestions to go clubbing and party all night. No. He liked to drink, but he was aware of his responsibilities, so he preferred to be the boring guy most of the time. Anyway, most of the time, he wasn't interrupted during his moment, except for a few acquaintances at the establishment occasionally, so he was quite curious when someone suddenly said his name. He didn't remember mentioning his full name to anyone there, and he wasn't famous enough for people to start recognizing him around. All of this only made him more curious. Huh? Turning to see who had approached, his eyes immediately landed on a rather comforting face to look at. In front of him stood a beautiful woman, her well-kept black hair highlighting her beauty. But, as beautiful as she was, it wasn't her looks that caught Marco's attention. After all, he had met many beautiful women in his life. No. What stood out the most in her appearance were her arms, exposed by a sleeveless shirt, showing defined muscles, an indication that the woman in front of him seemed to be quite active in physical activities. And her thighs. Mark couldn't help but glance discreetly. Whoever she was definitely his type of woman. Do I know you? Raising an eyebrow in curiosity, he took a sip of his drink. Mark noticed how after his question, a small smile appeared on the woman's lips. He found that a bit strange. Maybe you don't remember, but I remember well. The woman spoke before getting closer, sitting on the stool next to him. Marcus Walker, the troublemaking nerd, known for picking fights with all the bullies in high school. Strong and smart, a teenage girl's dream. Mark smiled at those words, memories of a fun period in his life surfacing in his mind. In my defense, I never started a fight. He smiled disdainfully, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. And troublemaking nerd? Damn, that's pretty embarrassing. I hope I don't hear anyone calling me that again. He took another sip of his drink, turning back to the woman, staring at her as if trying to recognize her. And who might you be? You really don't remember, do you? Mark observed her attentively, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't remember her face. Well, in the end, he never bothered to connect with people in school, so it was normal he didn't recall most of them. No. And he wasn't ashamed to admit it. If this woman was important to him, he would certainly remember. How cold. Despite these words, she didn't seem upset. Flora, does that ring a bell? Flora? Mark pondered over that name. His mind wandered back to high school, and after a few seconds, he finally remembered someone. Flora, a girl who sat a few tables behind him. To be honest, he didn't remember much about her, but the little he could recall was that she seemed like a normal girl. Mark didn't think he had any significant interaction with her, except for a few words exchanged during school. But he couldn't deny, the woman had changed dramatically. Flora Pettersson, yes, I remember now. He nodded, turning back to the woman with a small smile. So, what brings you here? You didn't seem like someone who'd enjoy a place like this. I could say the same about you. She gave a light laugh, resting her arms on the counter as she turned to him. Well, some people change over time. Mark raised an eyebrow at her words. I can see that. Flora smiled at this, suddenly leaning closer. Are you insinuating something, Mr. Walker? Seeing her attitude, Mark took a sip of his drink with a smile. I don't know, would you like that? Oh, the troublemaking nerd seems to want to make some moves, huh? Finishing his drink, Mark turned to her. You said it yourself, I'm a teenage girl's dream, it's normal for me to use my charm sometimes. Ha. Sorry, stud, but your charm doesn't work on me. What a shame, I was even thinking of buying you a drink. The woman watched him in silence, her eyes narrowing as she pulled away. Well, maybe it works a little bit. Mark laughed at this. He seemed to have reconnected with someone quite interesting. Are you sure about this? How long will you be up there? I don't know. 10 or 12 months, and I'll make some returns before going up again. It's not like you'll never see me again. I don't know, Mark. Flora. It's my dream, you know that. I know. But we'll be apart for so long, don't blame me for being worried. Sigh. I know, dear. But it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, I can't let it pass. In a well-kept room, Mark and Flora were sitting on the edge of the bed. I know. Flora, in the midst of that discussion, showed a somewhat downcast expression, which was quite noticeable to Mark. He could understand her concern. He would spend an entire year on the space station, returning only once a year to rest for a few weeks before going back to the station. He didn't blame her at all for acting this way, but he couldn't give up on this. Part of his life had been dedicated to achieving this. Giving up now would be like spitting in the wind. That's why he decided that he would at least try to appease her by doing something he had been thinking about for some time. They had been together for 4 years, and he could say that the woman in front of him was definitely the woman of his life. He didn't fear the idea of spending the rest of his life with her. That's why he decided not to delay this decision any longer. Before he flew to the stars, he would give her the best memory of her life. Flora, do you love me? In the silence between the two, this question came out of nowhere, which confused the woman for a moment. What kind of question is that? Of course, I love you. Mark nodded with a satisfied smile. I understand. And getting up, he moved until he was in front of the woman, making her raise an eyebrow in curiosity. But it didn't take long for her curious expression to change completely when the man knelt in front of her, her heart skipping a beat. Marry me. And pulling out a small box from his pocket, Mark simply made his proposal. What? And Flora, completely caught off guard, could only open her mouth in disbelief as her heart threatened to jump out of her throat. Are you serious? I'm serious, marry me. He opened the box to reveal the ring, which, although simple, was magnificent in the woman's eyes. Become my wife, and I promise not even the stars will be able to separate us. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. With those sincere words, Flora felt tears well up as she heard them. And as he waited for an answer, he noticed how a bright smile appeared on the lips of the woman he loved so much. Stupid stud, seems I was wrong when I said your charm didn't work on me, wasn't I? She wiped her tears with a sniff, her tearful eyes turning to the man with a passionate sparkle. Yes, I accept to marry you. Beep. Lying on his dormitory bed on the station, Mark, busy with his tablet, blinked when a notification sounded from his computer on the desk, his eyes moving to the screen. I hope it's not a last-minute job, I don't want to go out at this hour. Sighing, he got up and moved to the desk, pulling out the chair and sitting down. But expecting to find a message from the station, a smile appeared when he saw it was a message from his wife. It had been a few months since he left, and during that distant time, they couldn't avoid some arguments about it. But in the end, despite the arguments, they always resolved them. Because that's how a couple should be. Despite adversities, they kept loving each other. Clicking on the notification, Mark adjusted in the chair when he noticed the message was quite long, his eyes narrowing in curiosity. "Hey, Mark. I know we've argued a few times over the past few months, but you understand it. Being away from you has made me a bit irritable. But you know, I don't dislike it so much. This distant time only makes me more anxious with each passing day. Your return isn't that far off, is it? It's 4 months away now. Sometimes I can hardly sleep when I remember it, can you imagine?" "Ha. I'm sure you can, I can tell you're dying to miss me. You know, I can only think of how it will be when you come back. I'll make sure it's the best month of your life, so don't worry. So, don't take too long, okay? I wouldn't want you to delay for a single day, so make sure to prepare everything when the time comes, alright? Not even the stars will be able to separate us, that's what you promised, wasn't it? So make sure to return to me in one piece. I love you, Marcus Walker. Take care in this infinite space. My man, my love." Watching the window showing the darkness of space, Mark lowered his head with a small smile. "I love that woman." Beep. "Mark, there's a problem with the exterior wiring of the ship. We need you to take a look." Opening his eyes when a strong icy wind touched his skin, Itadori moved his eyes to his hands. These memories, all of them came to his mind. Important moments for him, which were engraved in his memories. True. Miracles in his life. No. And because these memories were so important to him, he felt the anguish fill his chest. Because against his own will, he felt as if they were slowly being erased like embers on a sheet of paper. And he had no control over it. No, no, no. Grabbing his head in anguish, Itadori gritted his teeth as he felt those memories being taken from him without resistance, the tears threatening to fall from his eyes as he realized important moments of his life were being taken from him as if they were nothing. Stop it. Triangular marks appeared on the skin of his forearm, stopping when finally 7 of them appeared. Itadori immediately froze when this happened, his hands falling to his sides as his eyes focused on the snowstorm in front of him. He hadn't forgotten. He had felt as if those moments were being erased, but that wasn't the truth. His memories hadn't disappeared, whatever the cursed technique had tried to do, it hadn't gone as planned. But instead, Itadori felt it would have been better to have them erased from his mind. Because instead of taking them from him, the technique had done something worse. It took away everything those moments meant to me. He declared. The technique, to grant him an accumulation of miracles, removed the feeling of precious moments for Itadori from his old life. Its main target, his life with his wife. Not everything was lost, as Itadori still had feelings for the woman, but some important moments of his life with her had completely lost their meaning. The day they reunited. The day he proposed to her. The day he read her last message before being taken to this world. These moments had served to accumulate 6 miracles. And this deeply irritated the sorcerer because he could no longer feel anything about these moments. Crack. Itadori Yuji was deeply irritated. Jogo watched the boy in silence, a scowl forming on his features as he noticed how the boy seemed to exude irritation. Tisk, he scoffed. Why did this human, who served merely as a vessel, look at him with such disdain? Such an insignificant, weak being, it infuriated Jogo deeply. But he didn't let this rage consume him. As much as he wanted to incinerate Itadori right there for his arrogance, Sukuna, in the eyes of the curse, was an indispensable ally. Having him on their side was a guaranteed victory. But that didn't mean he couldn't hurt the boy a little. If he hurt him enough, he could force him to switch with Sukuna to survive. This would give him the opportunity to speak directly with the King of Curses. With a smile, Jogo let the temperature of his body rise. Yes, he had a plan. Arrogant humans. Raising his palm, the temperature of the environment surged, heat radiating from the curse. You are nothing but insects, merely preparing the ground for the true humans. But just as a flame attack seemed about to form, Jogo's eyes widened as the boy disappeared before his eyes. He's fast. Jogo went on alert, his eyes moving downward as he noticed the boy's movement. But I can still keep up with him. Black. But seeing the boy stop in front of him, Jogo blinked in confusion. Boom. But that confusion was quickly replaced by shock as a fist crushed his stomach, electricity exploding in all directions as he spat saliva, his body flying away like a bullet. Flash, Itadori declared calmly, a sigh escaping his lips as he shook his fist. He's tough, he noted, his eyes moving to his trembling fist. Much tougher than Hanami. With an irritated look, the boy cracked his knuckles, the cursed energy in his body exploding before stabilizing all at once. This won't be an easy fight. But I'm confident. Observing the trail of destruction Jogo's body had caused through the station, Itadori followed. I'm going to win. Noticing a light shining in the distance, Itadori narrowed his eyes. And realizing how the heat around him seemed to rise, he immediately understood what was happening, jumping seconds before a wave of flames engulfed him. Damn, I feel like even if I coated my body with cursed energy, I still wouldn't withstand this heat. Landing, he went on alert as he felt the ground shake, his head turning to see Jogo's unmistakable volcano head charging toward him. Damn you! Raising his defense, Itadori gritted his teeth as Jogo struck him in a blink, his forearms trembling with the impact as his feet were dragged back. But it didn't stop there. To the boy's surprise, Jogo continued his assault, grabbing his wrist and hitting his stomach with a full punch. Itadori's eyes widened, blood rising up his throat as he felt some of his ribs crack. Insolent human. The boy staggered, and Jogo prepared a fireball with a malicious smile. With just these few blows, Itadori could clearly see the difference in strength between them. Even coating his torso with more cursed energy than usual, Jogo was still able to deal him significant damage. He was aware there would be a tremendous power gap between them, but feeling it firsthand was still a bit unsettling. But as shocking as it was, it aligned with his expectations. He wouldn't go into a fight like this without a trump card. Watching the curse prepare his attack, Itadori confused him by planting his feet firmly on the ground and lowering his stance, cursed energy concentrating in his fist as if preparing an attack. Jogo found this strange. Was the boy trying to counter one of his fire attacks with a punch? Don't make me laugh. Jogo mocked, the heat of the fireball in his hands intensifying as he seemed ready to launch it. I'll make you regret your foolishness. Clap. But as he seemed about to launch it, his eyes widened as those claps echoed, the environment shifting before his eyes. That sorcerer again? Clap. Turning, Jogo's eyes widened again as the scene changed once more, blinking as he felt a massive concentration of cursed energy exploding in front of him. What? Confused, he slowly moved his gaze downward to find Itadori in front of him, in the same position as before, his cursed energy more concentrated than ever. Black. Jogo realized the danger, but before he could move, his eyes almost popped out of their sockets as a fist smashed his solar plexus, blood surging up his throat and flying from his mouth along with his body, which shot through the station's ceiling like a cannonball. Flash. Itadori watched the curse's body disappear to the surface, a shock of pain making him wince as a bit of blood dripped from his lips. Damn, I think I ruptured some of my organs. Wiping the blood, he regulated his breathing. Thanks a lot for the help. Grateful, he turned to see Todo walking towards him. Don't thank me yet, brother. this isn't over. Itadori smiled at that. Seeing his friend there ready to help eased his anger a bit. It's going to be a tough fight, he said. But we'll win if we fight together, Todo promptly responded. Itadori smiled and, patting Todo's back amicably, took a step forward. Cover my back, let's destroy this curse. Running through the deserted city streets, Megumi found himself lost on what to do. At this point, he should find Itadori so they could join Nanami's team, but he had been unable to find his companion. In this chaos, he felt too out of place. After defeating that strange man, he moved through the city streets eliminating as many curses as he could, and along the way, he saved some civilians. But beyond that, he hadn't done anything significant. Tremor. Feeling the ground tremble beneath his feet, Megumi went on alert as he prepared himself. But to his surprise, his eyes widened as something broke through the ground a few meters ahead, his eyes landing on a strange creature with a volcano head that collided with a building. Damn humans! Jogo cursed as he landed on the ground, wiping the blood dripping from his lips. But just as he seemed ready to return to the battle, he blinked as he noticed a human staring at him from afar, his eyes narrowing in irritation. Damn it! Megumi felt sweat drip down his forehead, his hands coming together in anticipation. When a wave of flames engulfed an entire city block, Megumi found himself cornered, struggling to maintain a few shadows around his body. Facing such a powerful opponent, Megumi could do little more than defend against the waves of flames. Fortunately, he had been able to keep the curse at bay through his shadow manipulation, but he knew this wouldn't last long. He was already feeling the exhaustion setting in. Sinking into the shadows seconds before a wave of flames reached him, Megumi emerged in an alley, breathing heavily. Coward, stop running. From the darkness, Megumi watched the curse searching for him furiously. I can't keep this up. If I can't defeat this guy, I need to retreat and regroup with the others. Seeing that the curse couldn't find him, the sorcerer narrowed his eyes as he pondered what to do. I think I know what to do. And it didn't take long for an idea to come to his mind. Rumble. Jogo felt the ground suddenly tremble, his eyes narrowing as he immediately located the source of the tremor, turning his head toward a corridor not far from where he stood. Found you. With a single move, he reached the alley, preparing to unleash a devastating flame attack. But he was surprised when instead of the sorcerer, he found himself facing a huge elephant threatening to demolish the alley walls with its enormous body. What the hell is this? He wondered, but had no time to think more about it when, suddenly, a powerful jet of water was shot from the elephant's trunk, hitting him with such force that it pushed him back. Damn it! When the jet stopped, a soaked Jogo immediately raised his palm but grew irritated when he didn't see the elephant anywhere. New. But hearing electricity resonating from behind, he turned to see a large flying Shikigami charging toward him. It was an alarming sign, making him jump seconds before the bird hit him, narrowly avoiding electrocution. But as he was in the air, he couldn't do much when he turned to see the same elephant from before atop a building, its trunk pointed at him, ready to fire. Boom! The jet of water this time was even more powerful and seemed to hit the curse squarely. Megumi nodded in satisfaction at this, turning and starting to run while dismissing all his Shikigamis. That should buy me time to find the others. And jumping across rooftops, since he didn't want to spend more of his reserves summoning new, he moved relatively quickly. If I can reunite with Itadori and Nanami, I'm sure we can handle this. I just need to fin dash. But as he moved confidently, his eyes widened when his peripheral vision caught a blur. Disappear, insolent human. Megumi felt a cold sweat on his neck as Jogo suddenly appeared in front of him, desperation taking over his expression as his hands moved automatically to counterattack. But seeing the light of the fire in front of him, he realized there was no more time. Clap. Jogo smiled as the flames swallowed the sorcerer, but as the wind cleared the smoke from the flames, his teeth clenched in irritation when instead of a burned human, he saw a charred curse in his place. Turning around, he immediately noticed the sorcerers in the distance. "Thank you." Supporting his hands on his knees, Megumi thanked them while catching his breath. "No problem, we would have arrived sooner, but some people were still trapped underground," Todo explained, stretching his arms in preparation. Beside him, Itadori rolled his shoulders while getting ready, cursed energy concentrating in his fists before spreading back through his body. "We'll need all the help against this guy, so pull yourself together, Fushiguro." Megumi nodded, wiping the sweat from his forehead, and raised his head while relaxing with the presence of his two companions. Itadori smiled at this. Having Megumi by their side in this fight would be an advantage, making the battle easier, but it still wouldn't be easy. A slip-up and Jogo could fatally strike them, so they would have to fight with full attention, considering each other's presence. Fortunately, Itadori could tell that he and Todo were well synchronized, and Megumi would serve as great support with his Shikigamis. Taking all this into account, he confidently said, "We're going to beat this guy." Jumping when a stream of flames flew toward the three, they immediately separated. "Let's confuse him," Itadori shouted, jumping onto a building. Jogo growled at this. Seeing them devising a plan in front of him only served to irritate him. "Bastards." He alternated between looking at the three, who spread out like cockroaches. "Insects, I'll show you." With a sudden buzzing sound, numerous insects emerged from the top of the curse's head, putting the three sorcerers on alert. "There's no point in running." Itadori was surprised when, in an explosion of speed, the insect spread out, shockingly reaching him in an instant. He saw the insect appear in front of him, and seeing how the creature seemed intent on stinging him, he immediately grabbed and threw it away, his mouth opening as a powerful explosion followed. "If that had hit me, I wouldn't have come out unscathed." Boom! Seeing how other explosions sounded, he worried about the well-being of the other two. But when he noticed Jogo exploding in his direction, he realized he wouldn't have time to worry about the others. Insolent vessel. Switch now. Blocking a punch with difficulty, Itadori promptly countered with a powerful punch to the curse's chest, the attack doing little more than pushing him slightly back. Jogo received the attack with irritation, striking with his fist, only for Itadori to dodge and hit his jaw with a precise elbow. A vein bulged on the curse's forehead, and about to launch a devastating flame attack, he choked when the boy's fist crushed his stomach, black lightning spreading in all directions. "That again?" "I thought he needed to concentrate like the last times." Jogo growled, and jumping back, he prepared to launch a wave of flames. "New!" But hearing a voice from behind, he tried to jump to escape an attack, but it proved a useless move as he was struck by an electrified wing. It pushed him forward and froze his body for a moment. A moment Itadori, accumulating cursed energy in his fist, promptly took advantage of. Black. Jogo's eyes widened as he saw the boy preparing the attack, his teeth clenching as he seemed to try to find a way to escape. Flash dash. And Itadori, launching his fist, stopped his attack at the last second when the temperature in front of him increased, his eyes widening as he jumped back seconds before a pillar of flames emerged from Jogo's body. "Damn humans!" Jogo shouted furiously, his hands coming together as the fire around his body disappeared. "Trying to humiliate me like this? I'll kill you all." Domain expansion. Cursed energy spread in all directions, Itadori and Megumi freezing for a moment. "Todo, now!" Itadori shouted, and in the distance, Todo moved quickly. Coffin of the Iron Mountain. Clap. Itadori and Megumi disappeared seconds before the barrier reached their bodies, appearing not far away. Damn, that was close. Itadori took a deep breath as he watched the curse's barrier in the distance. If we had been caught, it would have been our end. But now, he definitely won't be able to expand his domain for some time. We need to take advantage of this moment, Megumi declared, to which Itadori nodded. Let's cook. We will overwhelm him with attacks as soon as the barrier breaks. We cannot give him any freedom to use his flame attacks. In front of the still standing barrier, the trio prepared for the assault against the curse. Itadori was the most active in coming up with a plan and didn't hold back from giving orders in this situation. He was by far the one who knew the situation best, so this was normal under the circumstances. Besides, Todo didn't seem to mind and would follow whatever his friend proposed. Fushiguro, I need you to support us with your shadows. You've spent a lot of cursed energy, so it would be better for you to keep your distance. Megumi nodded, biting his lip as he seemed irritated by this fact. Todo and I will attack him directly. In the worst-case scenario, I can expand my domain. Todo nodded, raising an eyebrow as he noticed cracks forming in the barrier. It's time, get ready, brother. Megumi immediately moved away, leaving Todo and Itadori preparing for the battle. One hit and we're screwed, right? Todo asked with a smile, stretching his shoulder. Itadori laughed and, cracking his knuckles, let the cursed energy flow over his body, enhancing it to the maximum he could at the moment. So just don't get hit. With a pat on the sorcerer's back, Itadori moved away the moment the barrier broke, a furious Jogo revealing himself ready to attack with flames dancing around him. Being the first to be seen, Todo prepared as a wave of flames advanced toward him, disappearing seconds before the attack reached him. Jogo growled at this but had no time to try to chase the sorcerer when he noticed movement to his side. Hey, Mount Fuji head! Itadori reached the curse in an instant, grabbing his wrists before he could retreat. Let me go, damn you! Jogo gritted his teeth, and just as he was about to break free with a burst of fire, he frowned when instead, only smoke emanated from his palms. Itadori raised an eyebrow at this, a mocking smile spreading on his lips. Unstable technique, isn't it? Huh? Boom! Jogo choked as a fist hit his stomach with enough force to lift his feet off the ground. I used to fear getting close because of those problematic flames of yours. Holding the curse by the neck, Itadori quickly continued his attack with a kick to his abdomen that pushed him back. But now, you're in my territory. Jogo widened his eyes as he noticed the oppressive aura of the human in front of him, his teeth clenching as the mere idea of a human intimidating him infuriated him. I'll destroy that pride of yours. Jogo declared intensely, spitting a little blood as he prepared to advance. Clap. But just as he seemed ready to return to the fight, he could only turn enough to notice Todoa's appearance, a kick hitting his neck and sending him flying. Let's go, brother. Stopping his momentum with his feet, Jogo raised his head to see the two sorcerers advancing toward him. Come at me. Jogo prepared, his eyes moving between the sorcerers as they began to switch positions with each other. Right. Turning, Jogo promptly blocked Itadori's fist, the boy moving away before he could counterattack. With the boy creating an opening, Todo clashed with the curse, hitting him with a powerful kick that struck Jogo's defense hard. But the curse wasn't fazed by this, and grabbing the sorcerer's leg, prepared to throw him, only for a fist charged with cursed energy to hit his jaw. Now, Todo. Clap. Todo immediately switched places, Itadori appearing in front of Jogo with his fist overflowing with cursed energy. Black flash. And punching with all the strength he could muster, Itadori hit Jogo's jaw accurately, black flashes spreading across the street as the curse was pushed upward. Blood gushed from Jogo's mouth, his body in midair about to fall. Fushiguro. But before he could fall, Itadori shouted urgently, Megumi in the distance, bringing his hands together as a huge elephant appeared behind him. Boom! And before Jogo could even think of reacting, a powerful jet of water hit him squarely, his body being pushed by the force of the water and smashed against a building. It's not over yet. We need to exorcise him before he recovers," Itadori declared, seeming ready to advance toward the building. And Todo, seeing this, immediately prepared to accompany him. Huh? But as he seemed distracted, he barely noticed the fluctuation in energy around him, his head lifting the moment a strong concentration of cursed energy came from behind him. And turning to see a structure of earth attached to a building wall, he could only curse. Shit! A burst of magma shot from the miniature volcano, its flames hitting the sorcerer squarely. Todo! Itadori turned the moment his companion's body was covered by the attack. "I understand now how Hanami was killed by you." But before he could get closer, his body froze when a voice came from in front of him, his eyes lowering to find Jogo's palm on his abdomen. "But you are fools to think I will fall just because of this." Itadori realized there was nothing he could do to escape such a situation. So he could only smile nervously. A powerful wave of flames exploded from Jogo's body, covering the young sorcerer completely and sending him flying with the impact. "Itadori!" From atop a building, Megumi called out in concern for his friend, his brow furrowing as he brought his hands together. Boom! But before he could complete his summoning, Jogo quickly attacked him with a wave of flames, the top of the building he was on exploding into pieces. "Useless humans!" Jogo spat, rubbing his chin, and turned to the rubble where Itadori should be. "I hope this is all worth it." Starting to walk with carefree steps, Jogo sighed as he approached. In his eyes, the sorcerers he had just faced were nothing but ants in his path. They were strong and still young, but Jogo didn't care about that at all. At the end of the day, they were just humans. Fragile and incompetent. Such disgusting creatures would never be able to surpass them, those who would soon claim the title of true humans. They who would inherit the earth, not these monkeys who called themselves humans. Irritating. He growled. Jogo loved the destruction he caused and the lives he took. He really didn't care about the death of humans. After all, why should he worry about stepping on ants? He, a curse born from the fear of fire-related calamities, saw humans as parasites, infecting the very home they lived in. That's why he didn't find them worthy of being considered humans, creatures that hid their true natures with shitty smiles on their faces. They, who were born of negative feelings, were truly pure. The curses were truly worthy. Stopping when he noticed movement ahead, Jogo narrowed his eyes as he saw the rubble in front of him tremble. And raising his hand in anticipation, he prepared to attack if necessary. But when a heavily burned Itadori, with scorched clothes and blood dripping from some wounds, stood up from the rubble, Jogo couldn't help but watch him with a bit of surprise. How is he still conscious? He wondered, observing how, in addition to burns, the boy also had blood flowing from several injuries. "Hey, Mount Fuji head." Coughing up some blood, Itadori called out to the curse, who looked at him with some irritation after being insulted. "You underestimate humans too much." Jogo frowned. What did this sorcerer mean? "We create things you could only dream of creating. Cars, buildings that reach the skies, and rockets that will eventually take us to the stars. And last I checked, you curses only exist because of us." Jogo prepared to attack, clearly irritated by the words of someone who could barely stand in front of him. But a raised hand from Itadori made him stop. "Did you know that lava can reach up to 2192 degrees Fahrenheit? It's a lot, considering that the surface temperature of the sun can reach up to 10,832 degrees Fahrenheit. Where are you going with this?" Jogo asked, irritated with the boy. "Considering you used fire and lava attacks, I'll deduce you can reach temperatures of 3,632 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'm aiming high." Itadori spat some accumulated blood, a disdainful smile appearing on his lips. Jogo felt a vein bulge on his forehead at this. "Now, curse, do you know another interesting fact?" Bringing his index and middle fingers together, Itadori pointed his hand at the curse. Plasma is the fourth state of matter, and coming from the stars, it can reach millions of degrees Fahrenheit. And do you know who was able to manipulate it? Seeing the cursed energy oscillating around the boy's palm, Jogo went on full alert, raising his hand in anticipation. We, humans. Cut. Jogo widened his eyes as a cut opened on his chest, his teeth clenching as a burning sensation he had never felt before came from the wound. Well, it's nothing compared to the stars, it reaches 72,032 degrees Fahrenheit at most. But it's more powerful than anything you can do. Jogo, shocked by the fact that he had been burned, raised his head to see the boy pointing his finger at him. I'll show you what a plasma cut can do. Dismantle. When it came to chemistry and physics, Itadori couldn't say he was the most dedicated student. He knew the basics and understood that plasma was the result of a complex process of gas ionization. A plasma cut wasn't a proper cut but used high temperatures to slice through materials. How did it work? Itadori only remembered vague explanations from his companions at the station, so he couldn't really say. So how on earth had he managed to interpret Sukuna's technique in this way if he didn't even understand the process behind it? Well, Sukuna's technique was akin to cooking. Fire and cuts were the main points of his technique. Itadori tried to interpret this differently, and he couldn't help but remember a tool he used to use on the space station. A tool that, while simple, was quite dangerous. Itadori decided to try replicating the effect, and surprisingly, he managed to do it. By expelling a jet of plasma at extreme temperatures, a plasma cut could separate metals like they were butter. Itadori just imagined this, and now he had an incredibly powerful technique in his hands. And now that he had his own interpretation, he didn't use as much cursed energy as before. The sound of dripping echoed through those silent yet chaotic streets. Jogo, standing still in front of the young sorcerer, remained frozen as that burning sensation returned, stronger than before. His eye, devoid of emotion, slowly moved downward, landing on his arm, only to notice that everything from the elbow down was gone. And seeing the bleeding stop, the curse raised an eyebrow in confusion when, instead of the expected regeneration, the burning sensation intensified. Why can't I regenerate? Raising what was left of his arm, he pursed his lips when he saw the wound was completely charred. So that's it. Still incredulous, Jogo touched his wound, frowning when the pain jolted him back to reality. I was really burned. Closing his eye, the curse sighed, clearly surprised by all this. Kid. But although he seemed calm on the outside, his eye opened to reveal an animalistic fury, the volcano in his head erupting as his one eye narrowed. I'm going to kill you. Itadori, standing before him, just smiled at this while taking a stance, his eyes narrowing as Jogo exploded towards him. Boom! Leaping back as Jogo punched where he had been, Itadori watched the ground beneath his feet explode into pieces, quickly retreating to avoid the debris flying his way. I feel like my injuries are slowly healing. Dodging to the side, he skillfully evaded a wave of flames. I must have spent a miracle surviving that attack, and I'm probably using another one to use reverse cursed energy involuntarily. Seeing a light amid the dust, Itadori leaped to escape a wave of magma, swallowing hard when he realized it was very close. It sucks not having control over this technique. In the air, his eyes moved down to see Jogo glaring at him with intensity. You won't escape now. The curse roared, jumping toward him with the intent to strike. Slice. But before he could reach him, he growled as numerous cuts struck him, his body being pushed to the ground while Itadori landed in front of him. Even though it uses less energy than before, I still need to end this fight quickly. Approaching the curse that was slowly getting up, Itadori promptly struck him with a punch to the chin, quickly hitting him with a sequence of attacks that Jogo struggled to block. Black flash. And finishing the attack with a strong black flash to his stomach, Itadori sent him crashing into a building. That should do it. Chasing the curse, Itadori quickly entered the building, observing how the curse seemed confused due to the attacks. And clasping his hands together, he let his cursed energy spread throughout the environment. Odo. Now. As he seemed about to expand his domain, a confused Jogo opened his eye in recognition when he noticed an injured man running toward them. Sorry for the delay, brother. And to the curse's surprise, the man in question was Todo, who, despite having burns all over his body, was still standing firmly. Domain expansion. As those words left Itadori's mouth, Jogo's eye widened, his head turning to the young sorcerer as he raised his hand. No. I won't let you. Clap. Hunting territory. But before his attack could be released, Itadori was quicker, his barrier expanding in all directions and covering the entire building. Jogo froze as darkness overtook his vision, his eye widening in surprise as a chilling sensation hit his skin. Is this cold? As the environment changed around him into a forest engulfed by a heavy snowstorm, Jogo surveyed his surroundings in alert, confused when the heat emanating from his body couldn't melt the snow at his feet. What is this? But as he seemed about to test his fire, he turned as a noise sounded from behind him. Boom! Only to be struck by a precise punch to the face, black lightning spreading through the forest before the curse was hurled by the attack. Damn it! Rolling on the ground and stopping his momentum, Jogo spat blood as he raised his hand, freezing when he couldn't unleash a fire attack. What? What happened to my technique? Itadori, standing before him, just stared at him silently, the sound of heavy footsteps echoing behind him before a massive wolf revealed itself. In my domain, your technique is completely neutralized. Jogo frowned at that information, standing up and wiping his lips. There are also other details, but I really don't feel like telling you. Wiping the blood from his face, Itadori sighed, his head lifting as his ears picked up movement beside him. Jogo noticed it too, his eye landing on what seemed to be a low-level curse resembling a dog. This brought a smile to the boy's face. The only thing you need to know is that the longer my domain stands, the stronger I will become. And before the weak curse could react, the massive wolf devoured it in one bite, cursed energy overflowing from Itadori's body right after, which Jogo couldn't help but notice. Let's start this hunt. His innate technique, however simple it might have seemed, was still quite mysterious to Itadori. Except for its basic information imprinted on his body, he couldn't explain much more about it. As long as his wolf devoured a piece of a cursed spirit or any living being with a technique, Itadori could take that technique for himself. In a way, it was quite powerful, but in return, Itadori needed to master the new technique completely from scratch, and if they had very complex explanations, he would have to make his own interpretation of the technique. That was why his cuts, which theoretically should have been more powerful than Sukuna's, were still unable to slice through Jogo in a single strike. The ability to send plasma cuts was indeed more powerful, but Sukuna had a greater refinement of his own technique, along with a larger reserve of cursed energy. He could put more power into his simpler cuts without worrying about his energy expenditure. Itadori simply didn't have that advantage. Needing to conserve energy, he had to sacrifice power. But even if his slashing attacks didn't match Sukuna's, one thing was certain, his firepower was indisputably greater. Pushed back as numerous cuts appeared on his chest, Jogo snarled while retreating in time to escape a canine jaw. But as he seemed ready to attack the wolf, Itadori surprised him by closing the distance between them and hitting his defense with a punch. Jogo felt his body tremble from the power of that punch, and following his instinct's warning, he retreated seconds before a fist loaded with cursed energy shattered the ground where he had previously stood. But being pressured by two opponents, he was unable to escape when the wolf suddenly appeared behind him, its huge mouth closing around the curse all at once. Damn it! Jogo snarled as he felt the enormous fangs sink into his flesh, but with a single thrust of his legs, he quickly freed himself from the grip and escaped with a leap. Boom! And falling with a kick, he struck the wolf's head squarely, pushing it to the ground. Insolent creature. He spoke with disdain, raising his fist with the intention of continuing his attack on the Shikigami. Black flash. But as he seemed distracted, he didn't notice when Itadori appeared behind him, his fist striking his ribs with enough force to send him rolling across the domain. Seeing the curse fly with a jet of blood gushing from its mouth, Itadori petted the huge wolf, helping it up afterward. Attack only if you see an opening. Giving the wolf a pat, Itadori smiled as he saw it nod in understanding. The presence of this Shikigami was also a mystery to Itadori since there was no information about it in his mind. Its origin, its motives, and even its name, Itadori knew none of it. So, not knowing any of this, he decided to name the enormous creature. After its help, it was the least he could do. Besides, he couldn't keep calling it a giant wolf. Therefore, considering the circumstances of the Shikigami's presence, he decided to name the wolf with a name that, considering the context of that domain, seemed fitting. Amarok. With the wolf perking up its ears at the mention of that name, it turned, waiting for an order. Get ready. With that order, the wolf moved away, disappearing into the heavy snowstorm. Itadori, seeing this, turned to see Jogo struggling to get up from a snowbank, blood flowing not only from numerous cuts on his body but also from his mouth. The curse seemed to be in a miserable state. Anyone could tell he wouldn't last much longer, especially considering he was limited to using only 40% of his cursed energy. Even healing was an effort for him at that moment. But knowing this, Itadori couldn't care less. He knew that most likely, at that very moment, Maki and Nanami were struggling to stay conscious after being burned by the curse. Itadori was only doing what was deserved. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Itadori didn't care at all about killing curses like Jogo. Yes, he had felt bad about his brothers, but that was only because Akizu and Eso could be persuaded to switch sides. But that wasn't the case with Jogo. The curse wanted humanity's destruction at all costs. Nothing would change that. And unfortunately for him, Itadori was a human. What's the matter? Approaching confidently, Itadori stopped securely in front of Jogo, the curse raising his single eye to stare at the boy. Tired already? You seemed so excited just a few seconds ago. Damn you. Feeling a vein pop in his forehead, Jogo wiped the blood from his lips with irritation, his regeneration struggling to fix the rest of his body. You humans, always thinking you're so superior. Itadori raised an eyebrow as Jogo started talking, and curious to hear what he had to say, he decided to stay silent. We, the true humans, are the ones who should bear your title. Clenching his fist, Jogo's gaze became venomous as his scant cursed energy danced around his body. We are stronger, smarter, and more capable than all you walking monkeys. Cars? Rockets? Buildings? Don't make me laugh. How many of you had to die by your own species just to achieve that? So many wars, so much evil. We only exist because of your inability to coexist. How can a species like that think they have the right to rule the world? Itadori blinked at those words. He couldn't help but agree with some things. After all, it was due to humanity itself that the world was this way. If it weren't for the selfishness of the high ranks in the Jujutsu world, things would likely be better. There was too much evil, evil that continually strengthened the curses. But at the same time as evil existed, there were also those willing to sacrifice for a future. Even being a sorcerer for a short time, Itadori understood this well. He had died trying to lead humanity to the stars. Even knowing he wouldn't be the one to see it happen, he dedicated his life to helping this future. This was the true essence of humanity. Even if there was evil, selfishness, fear, and despair, the sacrifice of those willing to sacrifice was what kept humanity moving forward. A doomed race, certainly. But if anyone had the right to decide their fate, it definitely wasn't the curses. That's why they, the sorcerers, had been fighting for millennia. Most of them dreamed of a better future. Even if they wouldn't be the ones to see this future, they still fought. Jogo widened his eyes when suddenly, his legs were ripped off all at once, his head turning to see the giant wolf a few meters away devouring his limbs all at once. Damn dash! And with his body falling, Jogo fell silent when his head was suddenly grabbed, preventing his body from falling. You know, maybe you're right about some things. Raising his single eye, Jogo watched Itadori in front of him holding him with an indifferent face. And with his face becoming thoughtful, Jogo felt nervous. But as he seemed about to speak, he appeared to change his mind at the last second. Damn it, I tried to think of a cool one-liner, but nothing came to mind. Jogo felt a vein pop on his forehead. How could he lose to such an idiot creature? Well, anyway, you said some things right, but that doesn't change anything. Feeling an invasive cursed energy spread through his body, Jogo could only sweat in anticipation, his single eye widening in disbelief. Because I kill curses, it's simple. Before the curse could react to those words, not even a cry of pain escaped his lips as hundreds of cuts appeared on his body, the overwhelming heat carbonizing his pieces and leaving nothing but ashes. He seems fine. He must have used one of his shikigamis to protect himself. Slowly opening his eyes, Megumi groaned as he sat up, every muscle in his body screaming for him to stay still. Oh, he's awake. Blinking as he recognized a voice, he turned to see Itadori and Todo standing beside him. But as he seemed ready to speak, he was startled by Todo's condition. Much of Todo's body showed signs of burns, and his hair, which had once been tied in a strange ponytail, was now short and singed in places. But despite his numerous injuries, he didn't seem discouraged. Somehow, he had managed to mitigate the damage. What happened? Rubbing his forehead, Megumi sighed as he felt his reserves of cursed energy nearly depleted. We defeated that curse. Itadori crouched down, his eyes scanning his companion for any apparent injuries. That's good. Relieved, Megumi tried to stand, but exhaustion proved to be a stumbling block as he wavered. Itadori quickly caught him, helping him to his feet. You're exhausted. It would be best if you both returned to Shoko. That's right. We can't risk dash. I'm talking about the two of you. Todo, who wanted to speak, was quickly cut off by Itadori, who turned to him seriously. What? I can't abandon you, brother. He tried to defend himself, but Itadori just stared at him silently. You exhausted your reserves to protect yourself from that attack. The best thing is to recover before returning to the battle. Todo fell silent, his brow furrowing as he couldn't find a response to that. To defend himself from Jogo's attack, he had used all his cursed energy at once. Even though his boogie-woogie technique used an insignificant amount of energy, he still wouldn't be able to adequately strengthen his body. It would be suicide to move forward like this. I understand. With a sigh, the sorcerer nodded dejectedly. And you? I'll keep moving forward, we still need to recover Gojo-sensei, and I can hold off our enemies until reinforcements arrive. Handing a weakened Megumi to Todo, Itadori stepped back, saying, Are you sure? How well are you? Todo asked with clear concern. The mere idea of abandoning his brother left him deeply distressed. I'm fine, that blonde guy's technique allowed me to avoid fatal attacks. Todo nodded, and Megumi turned to see Itadori. I know I've said it before, but be careful. We'll be back before you know it. Itadori smiled, turning with a thumbs up, and began to move away quickly. Running through the sparsely populated city streets, Nobara struck a few disoriented curses as she aimed to reach the station. Having been sidelined in this entire operation, she couldn't help but feel irritated. Her friends were all on the front lines, and there was even a chance, as depressing as it was, that some of them might already be dead. Yes, she didn't have much to show compared to her companions, but that didn't mean she couldn't help. After her training, she could say she wasn't a burden. Itadori had helped so much in her training just for her to abandon them? No, she wouldn't sleep well if she did. I'll catch up with them, or our promise won't mean anything. Striking a curse squarely with her hammer, she quickly smashed its head, continuing her movement. Oops. But as she reached the station, her eyes widened when a voice sounded beside her, her head turning just in time to notice a blade flying toward her. Barely escaping the attack, she snarled as a cut opened on her cheek, her eyes landing on a man with long hair and a scarred face. Scarred face. So you're the curse giving our team trouble? Oops, missed by a bit. With a laugh, Mahito retracted his arm to its normal form and scratched his neck. Oh, am I that famous? Nobara sneered at the question. Yes, famous for being a coward. Upon hearing that, Mahito's eyes glinted dangerously, his smile fading as he lowered his hands. Girl, I like you. Letting cursed energy flow into his fists, he spoke disdainfully. It'll be worth killing you. But Nobara wasn't intimidated by his words, a sigh escaping her lips as she pulled some nails from her pouch. Even though I don't have much to show. And letting cursed energy flow into the small projectiles, she prepared with a focused look. I'll at least kill you. Mahito's eyes widened as several nails were shot toward him, quickly moving to evade. You missed. Tauntingly, Mahito exclaimed, immediately preparing to advance. But seeing the girl moving her hands strangely, he frowned in confusion. Missed? Snap. And with a snap, Mahito couldn't dodge as numerous nails hit his body simultaneously, shock and confusion evident on his face. As long as I keep my nails connected to me by cursed energy, I can control them to some extent. Nobara, holding more nails, smiled confidently. In other words, as long as my nails are scattered, I can attack you from all directions. Spitting some blood, Mahito merely smiled, showing he wasn't fazed by the damage. How thoughtful of you to tell me that. It's a shame your attacks don't work on me. Nobara wasn't affected by that information, cursed energy continuously flowing through her hammer. We'll see. And Mahito, seeing this, could only sigh in annoyance. Anyway, he could tell the girl in front of him must be someone special to Itadori. If she served any purpose, it would definitely be to mentally destabilize him when he and his original body met. So he would kill her right there and carry her body. Healing his body, Mahito prepared, his hand slowly transfiguring into a blade. Then let's continue. Walking silently through the station's underground, Nanami had half his body burned, an injury that should be fatal for anyone else. His flesh had been burned to a point beyond recovery, and his left eye had burst due to the high temperature. He shouldn't even be able to stand, so how the hell was he walking? To tell the truth, even he didn't know. Malaysia. Yes, that would be a nice place. Stopping in front of a mass of curses, he could only raise his head, his mind drifting to places he would like to live peacefully. Build a house on an isolated beach, read the books he had bought so long ago, as if he were reclaiming lost time. No. I'm here to save Fushiguro. Fushiguro? Taking a step forward, he barely cared that the curses were all heading toward him. And Maki and that old Zenin clan guy? What happened to them? With the curses approaching closer and closer, he slowly sighed as he raised his dull blade with difficulty. Tired. I'm so tired. I've done enough. Letting the little cursed energy he had left in his body flow, he prepared. I can rest now, can't I? Striking one of the curses, he ducked to avoid a bite, quickly cutting his attacker in half. And this continued for several seconds, his body being guided entirely by his instincts as he decimated a wave of curses that continued advancing toward him. To the point where nothing was left standing but him. At least, that's what he thought. Because in front of him, he noticed a silhouette approaching. And even being unable to react, he saw that scarred hand slowly moving toward his chest. So this guy was here the whole time. And as if the world were in slow motion, he could think calmly. I think I did well, didn't I? His mind wandered, from the beginning of everything to where he was now. How did he come to this? It had certainly been his choice. But was it the right choice? If he hadn't returned to this dark world, maybe he would be on vacation now. But would he feel good about himself? Thank you for the tutoring, Nanami. And suddenly remembering that boy's voice, Nanami could say. No, he wouldn't feel good. I didn't help you at all, Itadori. Having someone so experienced by my side was enough. Thank you. Itadori. Nanami could say that this boy had a promising future. He wasn't afraid to leave things in his hands. He trusted his student. Nanami didn't react as the curse's arm split in two, his body being struck by a force that sent him flying through the station. Sorry for the delay, Nanami. And Nanami, recognizing that voice, slowly turned to see Itadori beside him. Now you can leave everything to me. Days earlier, Jujutsu High School. To be honest, I really don't know how you could improve your curse technique. In the training field, Itadori and Nobara stood facing each other, the girl holding her metal hammer while the boy kept his fists raised. Your technique is simple, there's not much room for improvement. Dodging a hammer, Itadori skillfully backed away while continuing to evade the sorceress's attacks. But instead, I can say that there's definitely room for improving its effectiveness. Holding the hammer's handle inches from his head, Itadori quickly struck the girl's stomach with his palm, pushing her back and making her choke. That hurt, idiot. She held her abdomen, frowning as she turned to him. But Itadori was undeterred by her look, crossing his arms with an impassive face. This is training, you should be grateful it wasn't a punch. You leave too many openings. Nobara's eyes widened as Itadori suddenly advanced, quickly raising her hammer to block a punch that split the wooden handle in two. This made her eyes widen in astonishment, and retreating in quick steps, she took a guard stance. He broke my hammer even though it was imbued with cursed energy. What an exaggeration. In a fight, being hit is a death sentence. The one who strikes first has the advantage, and it's not good to be the one who gets hit. With those words, Itadori advanced, Nobara anticipating and kicking towards his head, only for the boy to dodge, countering with a sweep that knocked her on her back to the ground. Be like water, my friend. On the ground, Nobara narrowed her eyes. Did you just use a Bruce Lee quote? Itadori blinked, and stepping back with a fake cough, he shrugged. Back to the previous topic. Nobara muttered upon seeing that, standing up while dusting off her clothes. As I said, there's room to improve the effectiveness of your technique in a fight, and it has to do with your nails. Nobara blinked in confusion at that. What about them? You can't manipulate their movements, can you? Nobara didn't answer immediately, pausing to think about how she used her nails. No, I just fire them with a burst of cursed energy. Itadori nodded, already knowing that information. That's the point. If you could manipulate them from a distance, you could adjust their positions and fire with more accuracy. It would also be great for catching an opponent off guard. Nobara frowned at those words. It was indeed an interesting idea, but the practice was not as easy as the theory. It would require tremendous control of cursed energy, something she didn't have at the moment. Maintaining my cursed energy in the nails while manipulating them would require meticulous control. I don't think I can do that. Itadori smiled at that. He understood well that doing something like that wasn't simple, so he had a perfect way to solve this problem. Well, that's why I'm going to teach you a technique that will solve that. Nobara, seeing him smile, could only watch him with suspicion. I'm going to teach you how to unleash the Black Flash. Present, entrance of Shibuya Station. Leaping to the side to avoid a blade of flesh, Nobara quickly advanced towards Mahito, who promptly prepared by retracting his arm. Snap! But as he seemed confident, his eyes widened when numerous nails hit his knees, making him falter. Damn it! He growled, but before he could recover, a hammer struck his face full on, his body rolling back. And Nobara, responsible for the attack, continued her assault while spreading more of her nails on the ground. Thanks to Itadori, I can now adjust the position of my nails at will. Mahito, who stood up in alert, barely reacted when the girl hit his face with a flying kick, his body being pushed back. But the more I use my cursed energy, the harder it becomes to maintain meticulous control. Retreating when a blade threatened to cut her, Nobara skillfully avoided a giant fist with a jump, landing on the transfigured arm. If I don't unleash a Black Flash, there will come a point when I won't be able to maintain control. Mahito, seeing the girl on his arm, threw her up. Seeing this as an opportunity, he prepared to cut her in the air, only for two nails to hit both his eyes. Landing, Nobara flashed a disdainful smile and, advancing against the curse, she stopped in front of him for a moment. That feeling. Letting the cursed energy flow through her hammer, the sorceress regulated her breathing. I need to replicate it. Mahito, who by this point had recovered his eyes, was surprised to see the girl so close. Black. But before he could move, the girl surprised him by attacking, her hammer flying towards his head like a bullet. Flash. And Mahito, not caring about taking damage, was shocked when an enormous power hit his face, his body colliding with a wall while blood flew from his mouth. Nobara, with a focused look, cleaned the blood from her hammer with a shake, the cursed energy around her body flowing like never before. Mahito, who wiped the blood from his mouth as he moved away from the wall he had been thrown against, flashed a mocking smile. I remember telling you that your attacks don't work on me. Nobara didn't seem shaken by his words, her eyes narrowing as she raised her hand. Snap! And with a snap, numerous nails exploded towards the curse, embedding in various parts of his body. Yes, I noticed that. Mahito raised his head curiously when the girl spoke, seeming unbothered by the numerous nails in his body. That's why I decided to use something that will definitely work on you. Nobara explained with a scary smile, the cursed energy around her body spreading all at once. It's something new, so feel honored. Mahito's eyes widened at that, and seeing her cursed energy flow change, he advanced towards her. Maximum technique, Staples resonance. At the station, Itadori carefully laid Nanami on the ground, the older sorcerer already unconscious. Damn it! He growled as he saw the state the man was in. It was a miracle he was still alive, Itadori could see that. And he couldn't help but feel guilty about it. But he had thought too much about all this to say that lamenting wouldn't solve anything. He had made a choice by not revealing his knowledge about the curse attacks, but he wouldn't regret it. He had a chance to do better, and that's what he was doing. Starting with Nanami, he wouldn't let anyone else important to this world die. His life wasn't a spectacle, there were no spectators to shock. If the canon had a dark future for him, then he would change everything without a second thought. He wouldn't limit himself anymore. You've gotten stronger, Yuji Itadori. With a voice sounding from afar, Itadori turned to see a wounded Mahito emerging from a pile of rubble. Blood dripped from his chin, while half of his face was clearly battered. Blood dripped from his cut arm, but that didn't seem to affect him, evident when a new one grew in its place. And with new skills, I see. Itadori narrowed his eyes at that, moving away from Nanami as he faced the curse. If you think this is going to be a fight, Mahito. Approaching the curse slowly, he stopped a few meters away with confidence, causing Mahito to frown. "I'm sorry to break your expectations. Because this is going to be a hunt." Mahito observed Itadori in silence, noticing the change in the sorcerer's spiritual power. He could tell that the boy had become much stronger, to the point where he wasn't confident in his victory. To be honest, he was counting on Itadori's growth not being so significant. Even if there was a slight difference between them, Mahito would still have confidence in winning. But face to face with his enemy, he could see that the difference between them was like an abyss. Moreover, there was something else bothering him. The strengthening of Itadori was quite shocking, but even with that, Mahito was not intimidated. If he found the true form of his soul during the battle, he would be able to turn the tide. What really bothered him was how Itadori's soul had changed. Previously, his soul seemed normal, perhaps even weaker than normal, but now he could see a distinct difference. His soul was more robust, clearly stronger, which should consequently strengthen his physical body. This should be impossible. Changing the shape of the soul was not unthinkable, even for those without a soul-related technique, but strengthening them? When it came to souls, Mahito could say he was like a scientist. Therefore, he knew there was only one method of strengthening a soul. A fusion of countless souls. And even then, it only worked with weak souls, besides causing irreversible damage. What should this mean? Seeing Itadori confidently take a stance, Mahito raised his own hands in a battle pose, a slight disdainful smile on his lips. He felt that it was useless to think about it at the moment, as he had an objective ahead of him. Kill Yuji Itadori. Widening his eyes when Itadori disappeared, Mahito quickly raised his arms intending to protect his face. Ugh! But instead of an attack to his head, he choked as a strong impact hit his stomach, blood rising in his throat as he was pushed back. He has gotten much faster, and his physical strength is on a completely different level. Leaping back when a kick threatened to crush his head, Mahito extended his arm like a whip full of thorns and attacked Itadori. But Itadori merely deflected the attempt to hit him with his own fist, Mahito growling upon seeing how his thorns didn't even scratch his skin. And before he could think further about it, he quickly threw himself back as Itadori struck the ground where he was standing. Seeing that look. Seeing the boy pursue him with an impassive look, Mahito couldn't help but think. I have to admit. Boom! Being hit by a precise kick to his chest, Mahito vomited blood as he flew back. That he looks scary. Stopping his momentum, Mahito wiped the blood from his lips before quickly spitting out some reshaped humans, merging them all at once. Soul multiplicity, repel souls. And seeing Itadori advance in his direction, Mahito pronounced, the fused souls expanding into a huge mouth of flesh that exploded toward the boy. Cut. But expecting the attack to reach the young sorcerer, Mahito widened his eyes as the reshaped soul split in half, a blood-stained Itadori emerging in front of him in an instant. Black flash. And being hit by a full-force punch, Mahito flew like a bullet, his body colliding with the station structures and crashing through numerous walls. Feeling some debris fall on his body, Mahito slowly moved, removing some of the rubble from on top of himself. So it's as I thought. Slowly recovering his bruised face, he pushed the rubble away from his body all at once. He can use Sukuna's technique. He had already suspected this in their first fight, but he had preferred not to believe in such a hypothesis. But now, having his suspicions confirmed, he could only growl in frustration. If he had little confidence in victory before, at this point, he was already accepting the fact that he would be unable to win. At least, until he found the true form of his soul. Coming out from the middle of the rubble, he moved through the holes in the wall, emerging back at the station. But the sight that awaited him only served to irritate him deeply. What took you so long? Sitting on a bench, Itadori was casually drinking a soda, his disinterested eyes fixed on Mahito's irritated face. I was almost falling asleep here. How funny, I didn't think you had this kind of sense of humor. Mahito smiled, cursed energy flowing to his arms and dancing around his lungs. I was a bit disoriented before, so how about we start round 2? Mahito, did you forget what I told you before? Widening his eyes when he felt a strong cursed energy fluctuate beside him, Mahito turned to see a small volcano pointed in his direction. This is not a fight. Boom! Having his body hit by a wave of magma, Mahito growled as he was pushed away, smoke emanating from his burned skin. Was that Jogo's technique? Shocked by the sudden attack, he barely reacted when Itadori appeared above him, his head being struck by a hammer fist that smashed his face into the hard concrete ground. This is a hunt. Dazed by the attack, Mahito choked as a kick to his ribs sent him flying. And I am the hunter. Following the trajectory of the curse, Itadori grabbed him by the nape and threw him away, sending a wave of consecutive slashes. Mahito growled as he felt his body being cut, his feet digging into the ground as he took a stance. These slashes are very different from Sukuna's slash. Seeing how Itadori seemed unfazed as he walked towards him, Mahito gritted his teeth in irritation, his hands coming together as cursed energy gathered in his palms. I won't lose here, Itadori. Boom! And surprising Itadori, he was unable to escape when a massive mass of flesh expanded in front of him, pushing him through the ceiling and throwing him to the surface. Damn, hard to kill rat. Landing firmly on the ground, he sighed as he looked around. Well, it's my fault for not finishing him off quickly. But as the boy reprimanded himself, his eyes widened when he felt a fluctuation in cursed energy, turning to see Mahito right behind him with his fist glowing with cursed energy. Damn! And preparing for the damage, he was surprised when the curse suddenly froze, blood exploding from his mouth as numerous spikes emerged from his body. This brought a huge smile to Itadori's face, who turned while accumulating cursed energy in his fist. Thanks for that. And punching Mahito's face, Itadori launched him across the street, his body colliding with one of the surrounding buildings. Nobara. Let's finish this once and for all, Mahito. Backed against the wall, blood streaming from his eyes and mouth, Mahito was a grotesque sight to anyone who might see him in that state. And Itadori, seeing him in that condition, could only smile with disdain. He had often debated with himself about killing curses. It was always an internal discussion that resulted in a single answer: he didn't care. But seeing Mahito agonizing with frightened eyes, he could say he did care. He simply enjoyed it. Seeing someone like Mahito suffer was too good. And knowing that he had these strange thoughts, Itadori declared to himself, screw it. Megumi had once told him that they were not heroes, they were sorcerers. He couldn't agree more with that now. When Mahito suddenly spat out numerous transfigured humans, Itadori narrowed his eyes as he saw him gather them all at once. Soul multiplicity. And fusing them, the boy was surprised when the curse formed a humanoid figure full of muscles. Polymorphic isomer of the soul. Raising his fists, he immediately reacted when the brute lunged at him, skillfully parrying its fist that struck his defense with a heavy blow strong enough to make him retreat. This thing is strong. Narrowing his eyes, he grabbed the opponent's fist and struck with a single, precise punch to the head, exploding it. But in compensation, it doesn't seem very resistant to damage dash. His monologue was interrupted by a strong punch to the side of his face, and Itadori quickly retreated to see two other mutants advancing towards him. Smart. He praised, and retreating quickly, he blocked a flurry of attacks from the brutes. But it won't be enough to distract me. And noticing Mahito right behind him preparing a punch loaded with cursed energy, Itadori grabbed the two opponents by the throat and spread his technique through their bodies, cutting them into several pieces. But this didn't distract Mahito, who, upon launching his punch intending to hit the sorcerer's back, was surprised when the boy jumped over his fist, countering with a precise kick to his neck that sent him rolling away. Damn! Mahito cursed, quickly preparing other fortified humans. Itadori saw this as a nuisance, quickly exploding their heads with precise punches before continuing his assault. Soul multiplicity. But stopping when numerous deformed humans trembled chaotically in Mahito's hands, Itadori became alert. Body repel. And seeing a sea of flesh spreading in all directions, Itadori quickly leaped to escape numerous mouths that tried to bite him. Let's go for round 3, Itadori. Hearing the curse's voice beside him, Itadori turned just in time to see him advancing towards him. He used those simultaneous attacks to get close. Noticing, the sorcerer raised his arms. Black. But hearing Mahito, his eyes widened when he realized that his defense wouldn't be enough. Flash. Boom. The punch landed squarely on his defense, his body being launched far back until it collided with a wall of flesh, which immediately tried to devour him with teeth that suddenly appeared. Slash. But touching the wall, he let his slashes spread, burning and cutting the flesh. That was close. He smiled, his vision drifting to his forearms that now showed a mark. But I managed to reduce most of the damage. Getting up, he soon noticed Mahito standing a few meters from him, his eyes narrowing as he saw the curse's cursed energy oscillate around him. I'm almost there. With those words, Mahito smiled excitedly, his body recovering from the previous damages all at once. So give me more, Itadori. Itadori blinked silently upon hearing him, rubbing the back of his neck with a bit of embarrassment on his features. That was a little weird, man. Boom. Jumping back when a flesh whip threatened to hit him, Itadori noticed Mahito advancing towards him with his arms in the form of whips swinging in all directions. Difficult attacks to predict. Dodging with some difficulty, Itadori watched Mahito closely. He wants to get close and hit me like before. Blocking one of the whips, he quickly grabbed it and pulled Mahito towards him. But at this point, I'm more alert than ever. Punching when Mahito flew towards him, Itadori's eyes widened when Mahito exploded into smaller pieces, his true form reverting next to him and hitting his defense with a punch loaded with cursed energy. He's bolder after landing a black flash. Blocking another punch, Itadori tried to counter, but a smiling Mahito just ducked under his attack and hit him with a precise elbow. It drew some blood from his nose, but Itadori wasn't shaken and promptly struck Mahito's solar plexus squarely, making him choke. And with his fist loaded with cursed energy, Itadori prepared to unleash a devastating attack. But he was caught by surprise when suddenly, his feet sank into the flesh floor, his head lifting to see Mahito smiling madly in front of him. Boom! Taking a full punch, Itadori rolled backward and got up immediately, wiping the blood from his nose. But opening his eyes wide, he noticed how his vision from his right eye seemed affected, his fingers touching his forehead only to notice blood dripping from a cut. That's it. Frowning at Mahito's shout, he turned to see the curse holding his own face hysterically. I found the true essence of my soul. My true form. Hearing that, Itadori let cursed energy dance around his hands, accumulating at an accelerated pace. Distorted instant spirit body of dismemberment. And tearing off his own face, Mahito exploded into a mass of flesh. Itadori's face filled with disgust, but surprise soon took its place when the mass of flesh gathered all at once, revealing a completely new form of Mahito. He clearly got stronger. With hardened skin and monstrous traits, Mahito seemed to have become what he always was. A curse. After I kill you, I will continue to evolve. Licking his thumb disdainfully, Mahito smiled. As you said, let's end this once and for all, Itadori Yuji. Seeing him full of confidence, Itadori could only sigh, his eyes opening while he didn't seem affected by his opponent's power increase. Come on, Mahito. Colliding with each other, Mahito was the first to attack with a strike from his new tail, Itadori grabbing it and throwing him away before pursuing him. And landing on the ground, the curse turned in defense, promptly blocking Itadori's fist that lightly pushed him. I feel more resistance than before. Dodging an attempt to cut him with the spike on his elbow, Itadori fiercely struck Mahito's ribs, making him twist before stepping back. But I can still break through his defense. Besides, I don't only have my fists. Preventing himself from spitting blood, Mahito growled at being hit. After all, even finding his true form, Itadori was still a formidable opponent. He couldn't afford to let his guard down. But raising his head, Mahito was surprised to see Itadori pointing at him. Dismantle. And feeling his instincts scream, Mahito moved seconds before a powerful slash flew towards him, splitting his arm in half. I have the advantage. Itadori declared confidently, not wasting time advancing towards a stunned Mahito. Boom! Itadori had the advantage this time. Without a doubt, he was much stronger than his original counterpart. With an arsenal of numerous techniques and physical enhancement surpassing Nanami's, facing Mahito shouldn't have been a problem. But even with all his advantages, Mahito could not be underestimated in any way. No matter how strong Itadori was now, there was a decisive factor. Boom! He was fighting alone. Ugh! Choking as a pillar of flesh struck his side, Itadori staggered back a few steps, his eyes landing on a recovered Mahito, advancing toward him out of the confusion. Conversely, Mahito had an entire environment of flesh on his side. Itadori had been too arrogant. Blocking a tail swipe, Itadori quickly tried to counter with a punch, but a wall of flesh prevented him from reaching the curse. He's fighting more strategically. Noticing the flesh floor trembling under his feet, Itadori leaped to escape numerous hands trying to grab him. He's using everything he has. Narrowing his eyes as he landed, Itadori crouched into a punch charged with cursed energy, letting his body move by sheer will. Mahito saw this but couldn't react in time when a powerful spinning kick struck his face directly. Black flash. Mahito's body flew across the battlefield, his momentum halted by a flesh wall that stopped him from going any further. The curse flashed a bloody smile, his severed arm regenerating instantly, allowing him to use his new hand to wipe his lips. Itadori stood up with a serious face, his eyes fixed on the curse as he took a few steps toward him. "Alright, Mahito," he said, drawing only curiosity from Mahito, as there was no way to gauge his expression. "If it's a fight you want, then I'll take you seriously." Removing his burned jacket, he let his skin breathe, his torso completely exposed to the world. "Let's fight, curse." As the sorcerer's cursed energy expanded with his words, Mahito widened his smile, his own cursed energy exploding uncontrollably. "Then let's go, human." Charging at each other, Itadori was the first to strike with a punch to the curse's chest, which Mahito promptly blocked with his palm. But seeing this, Itadori was too fast for Mahito, hitting him with an elbow to the face. The curse's eyes widened when his knee suddenly gave out from a sudden cut. Boom! And Itadori took advantage, striking him with a precise knee, sending him rolling back before getting up with a single motion. Blood dripped from Mahito's mouth, but it didn't affect him as he immediately manipulated the ground around him to send dozens of flesh mouths towards the sorcerer. "He's using cuts on my joints," Mahito noted, his eyes tracking Itadori dodging the biting attempts while closing in. "Getting close is suicide, but a precise attack is still my best chance. I'll hit him with a precise strike to his heart, I just need one chance." Licking the blood from his lips, Mahito smiled. "I will definitely kill him." Itadori's eyes widened as the ground trembled, his instincts alerting him, allowing him to leap before a massive flesh mouth swallowed him. "How annoying!" he growled, preparing to burn all the flesh around him with a flame attack. But just as he was about to land, he sensed the cursed energy shifting to his right, instinctively spinning and striking Mahito precisely in the neck. But as he felt the curse's neck snap with the attack, he noticed something strange. Black. His eyes widened when he realized his mistake, turning to see the real Mahito right behind him. Flash. Too slow to react, he choked as a powerful punch hit his back, blood rising up his throat as he rolled across the ground. Damn it! Digging his fingers into the flesh, he halted his momentum, his eyes landing on his forearm to notice another mark had disappeared. The damage was reduced in exchange for another miracle. Spitting some blood, he stood to see Mahito rushing towards him, his eyes narrowing as he let the cursed energy concentrate in his fists. And Mahito, not stopping his charge, looked in confusion as the sorcerer punched the air before retreating a few steps. What is he thinking? But his question was answered the moment he was about to reach him, an impact hitting his side, causing him to flinch. What was that? He wondered urgently, lifting his head to see a smiling Itadori charging at him. Damn, I didn't think that would work. And with this declaration full of joy, Itadori struck Mahito's face, sending him flying, charging to continue the assault. What a pleasant surprise. Stopping his momentum with his feet, Mahito turned in time to block a punch to his stomach. And just as he was about to counterattack, his eyes widened again as another impact hit his stomach. Double impact? Struck by a punch to his jaw, Mahito was then pummeled by numerous attacks in succession. With a kick sending him backward, the bruised curse thought the attack had ceased. But fear hit him when an impact pushed his shoulder, his head lifting as his smile vanished. Damn! Boom! Pummeled by countless impacts hitting his body non-stop, Mahito could only grit his teeth as every part of his body was attacked by an invisible force. Black. And as the impacts finally ceased, Mahito could only glance down at Itadori's fist, charged with cursed energy, inches from his stomach. Boom. Flash. Mahito vomited blood, his body reverting to its original form unconsciously as he hit a pile of debris. No, it's not over yet. Vomiting even more blood, Mahito struggled to stand, the cursed energy in his body clearly weakened. Letting his body deform, Mahito suddenly exploded into several smaller versions of himself, Itadori narrowing his eyes at this. The sorcerer moved his eyes between them, moving as the small curses scattered in various directions. They all have some cursed energy in their bodies, one has more cursed energy than usual, and one has almost none. Thinking quickly, he burst towards the version with almost no cursed energy, grabbing it and holding it tightly in his hand. It must be this one. And his choice seemed correct as the rest of the versions disintegrated into flesh, the small Mahito in his hand trying to grow, only for Itadori to stop him with sheer physical strength. You know, Mahito. In a serious tone, he firmly held the curse in his hands. I've been thinking a bit. We're a bit alike. Dominating the struggle, he began to gradually crush the curse. You kill humans without care. And slowly bringing his hands closer to his mouth, Itadori declared. And I kill curses without care. Stopping his hands in front of his mouth, he said one last time. We're somewhat the same. Biting the curse, Itadori's eyes widened as something struck his abdomen hard enough to send him flying, the curse escaping his mouth. Stopping his momentum with his fingers, Itadori swallowed a piece of Mahito without a second thought, lifting his head to see an expected figure. Should I save you, Mahito? And in front of a legless Mahito, Pseudogito had finally made his move. Itadori watched in irritation, wiping the blood from his lips, and stood with a cautious look. I intended to swallow him in one go. He thought, taking a stance. I was afraid to expand my domain and have my barrier destroyed by this Kenjaku before eliminating Mahito. But I see now that I should have taken that risk. Walking through the devastated streets of the city, Nobara cautiously observed her surroundings. After blasting the shredded curse with her ultimate technique, she quickly deduced it must be a doppelganger since, according to Itadori's reports, the curse shouldn't have had so little resistance. Her attack was indeed powerful by the standards of her technique, but she knew it wouldn't be enough to destroy a curse of Mahito's caliber in a single hit. At this very moment, she was moving through the city while tracking the cursed energy signature of curses. Just a few minutes ago, she had felt a tremor and sensed a strong concentration of cursed energy coming from another block. Because of this, she decided to investigate. Her companions should be around, so there was a chance they were facing a powerful curse. And as she got closer, her ears caught the unmistakable sound of a black flash being unleashed, her eyes narrowing. Itadori? Without a second thought, she quickened her pace, soon finding a sea of flesh covering an entire neighborhood. What is this? Looking around, she was surprised to find an Itadori face to face with a wounded Mahito and an unknown figure. So you're the one impersonating Suguru Gito. Oh, you seem well informed. Of course, after all, you're responsible for all this mess. How are you feeling? In a makeshift medical facility far from Shibuya Station, Shoko asked while finishing healing Todo and Megumi's wounds. Great. Todo moved his shoulders, his eyes landing on his hands to notice small burn marks. Shoko noticed this. Burns are difficult to heal, and like those two, you will also have some scars. Todo nodded, turning to see an unconscious Nanami on a stretcher and Maki in a similar state. Where's Itadori? Sitting on a stretcher, Megumi wasted no time asking. Hearing the question, Shoko just took a drag from her cigarette before responding. When Arata and Nishimiya brought the injured, they said they saw him facing that shredded curse at the station. Then we need to move. And standing up, Megumi prepared himself. Not so fast. But before the teenager could take a step, Yaga revealed himself at the entrance. Todo frowned upon seeing him, uncrossing his arms in alert. Director, you're not going to try to stop us, are you? But Yaga didn't respond immediately, a tired sigh escaping his lips. No, I'm not. And moving aside, the director cleared the way. But there is a plan in motion to recover Satoru right now, so I ask that you don't act rashly. Todo and Megumi nodded, soon passing the man and heading back to the battlefield. Be careful. And Yaga, watching them leave, could only hope they could handle it. Don't worry so much, Director. Shoko approached, a lit cigarette in hand. They're capable. Choso couldn't understand. Itadori Yuji was the one who had taken the life of his younger brothers. Choso should destroy him at all costs and avenge his brothers as a true older brother. Then why? Why the hell was Itadori Yuji on his mind? Why was he sitting at the table with his other brothers? Why were they sharing a meal? Was his mind trying to deceive him because he saw the boy use blood manipulation? Or was Itadori Yuji his younger brother? Opening his eyes in a dark alley, Choso quickly stood up, which elicited a reaction from two figures in front of him. He's awake. I thought he would be unconscious for a few more hours. Choso narrowed his eyes at the sound of those female voices, his vision adjusting to the darkness to see two girls cautiously observing him. What happened? Why am I here? He asked urgently, which scared the girls. WL, that guy asked us to protect you. Choso narrowed his eyes at the answer. Who was he? The girls blinked, Nanako being the one to respond. The vessel of Sukuna. Choso widened his eyes, the smiling face of Itadori in his dreams surfacing in his mind. I need to find him, where is he? And grabbing the girl desperately by the shoulders, he asked while shaking her frantically. What? Hey! Wait! Stop shaking me. But Choso ignored her pleas, stopping only to stare at her with an irritated look. Tell me. I need to find my younger brother. Freezing when a tremor shook the alley they were in, Choso turned to see a curtain of smoke rising in the distance. And feeling compelled to head in that direction, he released the girl. There. With a concerned look, he took a step forward. I can feel him in that direction. And without a second thought, he started running towards the origin of the tremor, leaving a confused Nanako and Mimiko behind. I'm coming, little brother. He was really weird. Why did that guy ask us to save him? Spitting out some blood that had accumulated in his mouth, Itadori stood up alert, his eyes focused on Gito, who gazed at him with fascination. So you are the one impersonating Suguro Gito. Wiping the blood from his lips, he said bluntly, but this didn't seem to elicit much of a reaction from Kenjaku. Oh, you seem well informed. Itadori sneered at this, a small smile forming. Of course, after all, you're the one responsible for all this mess. Gito smiled at that and took a step forward from the battered mojito, removing his hands from inside his cloak. This alerted Itadori, who immediately prepared by spreading his cursed energy throughout his body. He had a superficial understanding of Gito's technique but knew it was very powerful. Considering it was in Kenjaku's possession, who was as old as Sukuna, it wasn't unimaginable to think that the curse user could defeat him with a single strike. Moreover, expanding his own domain was also unfeasible, as he lacked the refinement necessary to compete against someone like Kenjaku. In truth, Itadori had no advantage in any aspect. Kenjaku was too experienced, so his only chance was a sudden and precise attack. A powerful and decisive dismantle. He had plenty of cursed energy in his reserves, but it was certain that after such an attack, he would be exhausted. Fortunately, he had several of Sukuna's fingers he had taken from Jogo to recover at least a bit during the battle. He just needed the exact moment. In the mid-Edo period, people linked earthquakes with catfish and said it was a mystery. Approaching with calm steps, Kenjaku began to recount. They believed that a massive catfish moving underground was the cause of earthquakes. Upon hearing this, Itadori widened his eyes as he felt the ground disappear beneath his feet, his body plummeting towards the deep throat of a fish. But hitting his back on the ground, Itadori immediately stood up, his eyes urgently turning to his feet. An incomplete domain, he wondered, turning forward to see Gito watching him with a small smile. Damn, this is going to be too problematic. Did you think you fell on the ground? Funny, from here it looks like you just fell on your back. Itadori gritted his teeth upon hearing him, his eyes narrowing as his cursed energy perception spread to the ground beneath his feet. The power of cursed spirit manipulation lies in the number of attacks it can make. I have countless first-grade or higher spirits. Sensing his instincts alerting him, Itadori quickly jumped to the side as a swarm of centipede curses charged at him, his fist loaded with cursed energy hitting them and exploding them into pieces. But when he felt a ripple of cursed energy on the ground, he turned to Pseudo-Gito and jumped in his direction, escaping the huge mouth of the fish curse. Oh, you have great cursed energy perception. Gito praised with a smile, skillfully diverting the trajectory of a punch aimed at his face. But when he felt the power behind the attack, he couldn't help but be surprised. What a surprise! And blocking an attack that pushed him slightly back, he praised, the vessel of Sukuna is strong. But I'm sorry. Boom! Charging towards the man, Itadori widened his eyes as the catfish's head suddenly emerged from the ground, hitting him in the abdomen and sending him flying back. Damn! Stopping his momentum with his feet, he moved his gaze to his belly, noticing how a bruise was beginning to form there. That was powerful. Spitting out some blood, he pressed his abdomen with a frown, noticing how the attack seemed to have hit his organs. Strong, isn't it? It's a special grade curse, after all. Gito crossed his arms with a small smile. But as he seemed distracted, he quickly moved when a hand threatened to touch him, turning to see Mahito with a smile. I already knew, after all, I was born from humans. But before he could attack again, Gito began to absorb Mahito, his attempt to resist proving futile as his body was quickly suppressed into a small shining sphere. This made Itadori growl in irritation. The reason he had tried to devour Mahito earlier was precisely to avoid this. That was why he believed he should have expanded his domain, even with the threat of Kenjaku breaking his barrier. If he had been able to devour Mahito, what was coming could have been avoided. Do you know about maximum techniques? With Mahito's orb in hand, Kenjaku turned to Itadori. Damn, he talks too much. Itadori grumbled as he saw that he was about to start lecturing again. Besides domains, they are the most supreme cursed techniques. Well, this isn't all bad. Gathering cursed energy, Itadori took advantage of the speech that seemed more like a monologue to prepare his attack. The maximum manipulation technique, Maximum Uzumaki, combines all the cursed spirits I've absorbed into one and hits my opponent with condensed cursed energy. Itadori blinked at that. And maximum technique wasn't a strange concept to him since he had read about it in one of the books Gojo gave him. But it didn't seem so important in his eyes because he simply didn't know how it worked. But if it was supposed to be just an attack that used the full potential of the technique and a high amount of cursed energy to launch a devastating strike, it didn't seem like a big deal. To Itadori, it seemed more like an unnecessary waste of cursed energy. But did it have to be something that simple? Itadori could think more about the concept later. The Uzumaki is powerful, but using it means I lose the advantage of the numerous curse techniques I've absorbed. Initially, I didn't find it very interesting. I only thought of it as a way to recycle low-level spirits. Seeing the man bring the orb close to his mouth, Itadori widened his eyes, his hand discreetly raising in anticipation. But I was wrong, its true value is only revealed when the spirit is grade 1 or higher, and with Gito opening his mouth to swallow the orb, Itadori moved. The technique is extracted. Dismantle. Slash. As the slash flew, tearing the ground, a curtain of dust rose. And the moment it settled, Itadori could only observe the man with incredulity. I found it strange when I noticed you accumulating cursed energy. In a surprised tone, Gito spoke, a large catfish split in half in front of him. To think you would take Sukuna's technique for yourself so soon. Itadori immediately advanced, but he wasn't fast enough as Gito swallowed the orb in his hands all at once. What a big surprise. Defending a punch loaded with cursed energy, the curse user quickly retreated, skillfully dodging numerous cursed energy-charged arrows fired from afar. Did you really think I wouldn't notice what you were planning? Gito widened his eyes as he noticed Itadori bursting towards him. Black flash. But dodging the attack that emitted electricity, Kenjaku countered with a precise elbow strike, shaking Itadori's brain in his skull and allowing the man to send him flying with a wave of curses. Shot. And turning with a curse in hand, he blocked a shot. A precision rifle? Nice. I agree, that was clever. Dissolving the curse in his hand, his eyes widened when a presence appeared behind him, turning to see a blue-haired girl about to draw a sword. New shadow style. But noticing the girl's weak cursed energy, he paid little attention, preparing to block the attack with his own palm. Seeming confident, his eyes widened as another figure appeared beside him, his gaze moving to see a smiling Itadori covered in blood. Smart. Quick draw. Black flash. Blocking Itadori's fist, Kenjaku flew back with a bruise forming on his arm, a cut opening on his chest caused by Miwa. And Itadori, preparing to advance, stopped when a massive amount of cursed energy rippled from the curse user. Maximum Uzumaki. Itadori widened his eyes as a massive amount of cursed energy gathered with alarming speed. Reacting instinctively, he moved to the side of a stunned Miwa and threw her out of the path of the attack. He didn't need much time to understand that nothing in his arsenal could counter an attack of such magnitude, at least nothing he could use in such a short time. The most he could do was resist. Seeing the immense amount of cursed power flying toward him, Itadori urgently clasped his hands, his cursed energy expanding to cover and protect him as best as possible. Damn it! Noticing his limited reserves, he growled in frustration as the attack closed in. I used a good amount protecting myself from the last attack. I'm screwed. Boom! As a curtain of dust rose, Itadori opened his eyes to see the back of a man standing right in front of him. Damn it, don't go charging in alone. I had no choice. Blinking in surprise, Itadori turned to see Yutahime and Momo behind him. That attack was dangerous. Kyuzukabe, who had defended against Uzumaki with his simple domain, grumbled with trembling hands, gripping his sword tightly. Are you okay, kid? Hearing the question, Itadori wiped the blood from his face before standing up, a sigh escaping his lips as he readied his stance. As much as I can be. That's enough. Kyuzukabe nodded. New shadow style? Very good. Gito praised. Looking around, Itadori noticed Panda and Kamo arriving at the scene. Narrowing his eyes, he turned back to Kenjaku. Even with allies by his side now, it was clear they still weren't enough. It wasn't an exaggeration, it was a fact. Kenjaku was undeniably one of the strongest. Moreover, the way his eyes scanned the battlefield highlighted his analytical mind. Overpowering him with brute force wasn't a viable option, and they, without any clear plan, had no chance of defeating him head-on. But if they could at least devour a part of his body, it would be enough to weaken him. Defeating him, especially with Yuram's support, would be impossible at the moment. But they could still make an impact. Itadori's eyes widened as a new cursed energy signature entered his detection range. He turned to see an unexpected figure. Kenjaku, slowly turning, seemed to have noticed it too. Greetings, Choso. Choso, revealing himself to everyone, wore a furious expression. So, you've realized, Gito said with a slight smile. This only served to further enrage the death painting. So, that's how it is, isn't it, Noritoshi Kamo? The mention of this name shocked all the sorcerers present. Understandably so, Noritoshi Kamo was known as the stain of the Kamo family, the most evil sorcerer who had ever lived. A notorious figure in the Jujutsu world, he was often brought up in stories, especially among the three great clans, as a blight on the Kamo clan's reputation. Knowing all this, Itadori couldn't understand how someone could be named after such a vile person. He deduced it was an attempt to rehabilitate the Kamo name by distancing it from the ancestors' dark history. But Noritoshi Kamo is just one of my many names. You can call me whatever you like. Kenjaku spoke as if changing bodies was nothing out of the ordinary. How dare you? But as Kenjaku noticed the strong killing intent directed at him, he turned to see Choso charging at him. Trying to kill my brother, Itadori? Seeing this, Itadori could only blink in surprise. Witnessing this scene in real time was something else. But his shock quickly turned to caution as he noticed a figure appearing next to Kenjaku, her unmistakable white hair and feminine face making Itadori immediately recognize her. Get out of my way, insignificant creature. With her hand filled with cursed energy, Yuram glared coldly. I've waited long enough. Choso stomped in irritation. Get out of my way. I'm his older brother. Surprising everyone, Choso suddenly manipulated his blood to float around him, concentrating it in his hands before bringing them together. Itadori saw this as a perfect opportunity. With blood shooting faster than a bullet, Yuram reacted just in time, raising her hand to block the attack. But as she prepared to counter, her eyes widened as she sensed a presence next to her. She turned just in time to see a fist inches from her face. Boom! With a direct hit that sent her flying, Itadori wasted no time and charged at Kenjaku, who had just dodged a blood attack from Choso. "You don't waste time, do you?" Kenjaku smiled, blocking a punch aimed at his face. He grabbed Itadori's wrist and pulled, intending to counter with an elbow. "Let him go." But before Kenjaku could finish his movement, he had to jump back as Choso's fist threatened to connect. "If you're my ally, then help me overpower him," Itadori shouted, advancing toward Gito without waiting for a response, Choso following behind. "You all seem tired." Kenjaku retreated quickly, skillfully dodging their attacks before landing a solid punch on Itadori. "Why don't you rest?" Boom! Blocking another punch filled with cursed energy, Kenjaku was pushed back, only to spot Choso aiming a blood attack in his direction. Oops! Leaning back, he narrowly avoided the strike before closing in on Choso. That was close. Kenjaku struck Choso's ribs with enough force to make him wince, then turned to Itadori, blocking one of his punches and kicking the boy's knee with such force that a crack echoed through the area. Itadori gritted his teeth as his leg gave out, raising his arms to block a kick that sent him rolling. Damn, after 1,000 years, of course, his martial arts would be on a completely different level. Stopping his momentum and standing up, Itadori tested his knee, realizing it was fractured. Damn it! Suddenly, he was knocked down as Choso was thrown into him. Ice formation. Itadori's eyes widened when he heard that cold voice. He pushed Choso off of him, his gaze locking onto Yuram, who was preparing to launch another attack. Clap! Just as a mountain of ice advanced toward him, the scene shifted, and Itadori found himself several meters away from the attack. "We're here, brother." Hearing that familiar voice, Itadori turned to see Todo and Megumi running toward him. Itadori smiled but didn't waste time with greetings. He stood up and began running toward Yuram and Kenjaku. "Todo, I need your support. Keep the others away from the ice attacks." Ignoring the excruciating pain in his knee, Itadori concentrated cursed energy into his leg and stomped the ground, sending a wave of earth flying toward his enemies. "Megumi, keep the fake Gito on the defensive with a continuous assault from your Shikigamis." With nods from the two sorcerers, they split up. Todo imbued stones with cursed energy and switched the positions of the frozen sorcerers, while Megumi summoned a wave of rabbits to advance on Kenjaku. Itadori, charging directly, struck Yuram with a solid punch to the stomach as she destroyed the earth wave. The blow made her gasp, and as she prepared to counter, Itadori was faster, hitting her with an elbow that snapped her head to the side. "Using my master's body like that." Spitting blood, Yuram hit Itadori with her own punch, ice spreading rapidly over the boy's arms. "You insolent wretch." Ice formation. Thinking Itadori wouldn't be able to move his arms, she prepared a freezing attack, only to be stunned when the ice around his arms melted instantly. What? Dash. Black flash. With a powerful punch to her face, Yuram was sent flying, the ice around them exploding into vapor. Kenjaku, who had just finished off Megumi's rabbits, watched with keen interest. New. A large Shikigami burst toward Kenjaku, who leaped away, only to face the claws of Megumi's divine wolf. As Itadori prepared to charge at Kenjaku, he noticed footsteps approaching and turned to see Choso running toward him. "So now you're an ally?" Itadori asked, eyeing him. "No." Choso's expression was serious. "I'm your older brother." Itadori stared at him in silence, blinking slowly as he processed the statement. "How about trying it just once? Call me Big Brother." But their attention was quickly drawn back to Kenjaku, who had summoned a curse resembling a lion, sending Megumi's divine wolf flying with one attack. As they prepared to charge again, a strong concentration of cursed energy made them stop. Ice formation. Itadori widened his eyes as he saw Yuram back on the battlefield, raising her arm as if to combat his fire with her ice. Boom! But before they could unleash their powers, Yuram was suddenly struck by a massive force, her body crashing into the ground. It's been a while, Gito. Itadori turned to see the person responsible for the attack and locked eyes on a beautiful blonde woman. Can you answer the question from before? Yuki Tsukumo had arrived on the battlefield. What's your type of girl? Yuki Tsukumo. Kenjaku grinned upon seeing that woman. Having her appear suddenly was not pleasant for him, mainly because he had misjudged the level of the sorcerers. Especially his son, Itadori Yuji. There was something strange about the boy, something that certainly hadn't been granted by him. To be able to have Sukuna's technique imprinted on his body so early and improve his cursed energy proficiency in just 3 months, his talent could be comparable to that of Satoru Gojo himself. And that was far beyond Kenjaku's expectations. It was quite an unexpected result for him. But not unpleasant at all. It only showed that his work had been exceptional. Certainly, the circumstances for Itadori's creation were different. After all, finding Sukuna's soulmate was pure luck, but that didn't mean he couldn't do something similar in the future. Well, that was a conversation for his future self. That is, of course, if his plans were delayed again. Which he found quite difficult given the circumstances. Do you remember our conversation about creating a world where curses don't exist? Yuki suddenly asked, drawing a curious look from the curse user. No matter what method you adopt, humans will always advance to the next stage, and the next stage of humanity is to eliminate cursed energy. But Kenjaku seemed to disagree when he immediately responded. No, it's to optimize it. Itadori sighed and crouched down, letting his palm touch the ground, discreetly allowing the cursed energy from his body to seep into the soil. But as he did so, he noticed Yuki turning to him with a questioning look. What? I don't understand anything this guy is talking about. Actually, he could understand thanks to meta-knowledge, but he couldn't give much of an opinion about it. He knew that Kenjaku intended to assimilate the people of Japan with Tengen, but he didn't remember the details to be able to say how that should work. And regarding what he thought of the ideas of both, Itadori really didn't know. Optimizing and eradicating cursed energy were the two ideas. He liked the idea of ending curses by making everyone sorcerers, but he couldn't say if that was possible. At least, he thought this idea was better than the proposal of the two, but he wouldn't mind eradicating cursed energy if it meant everything could be resolved. I thought you had abandoned this method 12 years ago, when Toji Zenin died. Pseudo Gito commented with his usual serene tone. Sorry. I was talking with Gito, I ended up going back to the origins, but your method has a big flaw. Compared to Japan, other countries have a very low rate of sorcerer and curse appearances. The Tengen barrier is necessary to assimilate cursed energy. The only ones capable of becoming sorcerers through Tengen are the people of this country. Seeing how the two seemed focused on the conversation, Itadori slightly increased the transfer of cursed energy, his eyes narrowing as he noticed how low his reserves were. No matter, it should work. This means that Japan would have a monopoly on cursed energy. Some superpowers wouldn't stand still. It's easy to imagine the tragedy this would cause. This is a world far from the ideal I aim for. Haha. So what? But laughing at the woman's words, Kenjaku took a step forward. We have different goals. I don't want a world without curses, or peaceful. Raising his arm, he let cursed energy dance around his hand. Non-sorcerers, sorcerers, curses. These are the possibilities of cursed energy in humanity. Still, there must be more to human potential. I tried to bring this fourth possibility, but unfortunately, it didn't work. Itadori narrowed his eyes and stopped the transfer process, standing up. He didn't know why Yuki was so determined to talk, but it helped him buy time, so he wouldn't try to interrupt them. At that moment, he needed just a single opening. The answer was always to shine in the inner darkness of chaos. Do you understand? What I should have created was chaos that even I wouldn't be able to control. I have already extracted the cursed technique. Yuki widened her eyes, turning to Itadori urgently. There was a curse with a stitched body, right? He had a technique capable of manipulating the soul. Itadori blinked at the question. That guy absorbed him some time ago. What? Idol transfiguration. When a huge symbol appeared on the ground and in the skies, Itadori saw it as the opening he was waiting for. Disaster flames, volcanic eruption. And reciting these words, the ground beneath Kenjaku's feet heated up in an instant, steam escaping from cracks that suddenly formed. This alerted him, and he immediately jumped as magma exploded from the ground, quickly summoning some curses to protect him from the heat. The game technique? Kenjaku questioned with surprise, his eyes landing on an Itadori advancing through the magma as if the scorching heat was nothing to him. Oh, I can see. Landing on the ground, he quickly summoned the lion-like curse from earlier, the huge creature standing in front of him to defend its master. This is even more surprising. But sending the curse to attack the boy, Kenjaku was astonished when the lion was sent flying by a strong impact, his eyes landing on a flying Shikigami returning to Yuki. I sacrifice the rest of my cursed energy reserves in this attack. Cut everything in your path. And when the boy stopped a few meters from him, his eyes narrowed as he summoned numerous curses, sending them towards the teenager. Dismantle. Sending the cut, Itadori watched the attack slice through all the curses in its path, Kenjaku widening his eyes and moving just before the attack reached him. Cut. But he was too slow, implied when his eyes moved down to see his right hand was nowhere to be seen. Really? I can expect great things from you, Yuji Itadori. Itadori, seeing the man's hand fly away, quickly ran towards him even with exhaustion threatening to knock him down. But when he was about to reach the severed limb, his eyes widened as a fist hit his face squarely, his eyes moving to see Kenjaku already beside him. Damn it! He growled, and attacking with an elbow, the curse user simply grabbed his attack and hit him with a barrage of punches to his face, kicking his stomach and sending him flying away. Damn! Don't attack my brother! And turning when Choso collided with him, Kenjaku narrowed his eyes as he grabbed a fist, quickly striking the death painting's neck with a kick and pushing him to the ground. Holding a nail inches from his neck, he blinked to see a girl a few meters away with a hammer. Attack! But his fight seemed far from over when he heard, noticing how all the sorcerers at the scene seemed to charge towards him. I would love to continue. And picking his hand from the ground, he quickly reattached it to his arm before using reverse cursed energy. But I have more important matters to attend to. Ice formation. And before the sorcerers could reach him, a pillar of ice stood in their way, a sweaty Uram reaching Guido shortly after. Just in time, right? You look pale. Poison from that bastard's blood. She responded with a growl. I see. Very well, let's go. Boom. Summoning a wave of curses, Guido took one last look at an Itadori getting up from the ground, a small smile forming on his lips. Do you hear, Sukuna? It's starting again. The golden age of curses. Things had become complicated since Shibuya. The absence of Gojo had proven to be a strong blow to the morale of the Jujutsu world, even though only 2 days had passed. The High Council might try to hide it, but the insecurity and uncertainty were palpable among the sorcerers. Without Gojo Satoru, the conflict was undeniably tilting in favor of the curses. Itadori, like the others, could see this clearly. But he couldn't care less about what the council failed to do. He had more important matters, and with a tremendous weight on his shoulders due to Satoru's sealing, he was more focused than ever. His sentence had not yet been revoked, so he saw no need to make a move for the time being. Although he had been able to avoid the possession of his body, and consequently prevent the devastation of a large part of the city, the deaths of thousands still couldn't be avoided. With curses more rampant than ever, no one was safe. Itadori set out to address this, and by reshaping the souls of some lower-level curses, he spread them throughout the city to cover more ground. Reshaping souls was much more difficult than he thought it would be, and he couldn't help but commend Mahito. He didn't know if it was because the curse was born with the technique, but Itadori could tell he couldn't do the same, at least not in such a short time. Choso had been with him for these 2 days, helping to deal with some troublesome curses. Itadori didn't have much to say about the man, but he was good company. His older brother complex was a bit annoying, but Itadori could understand that. He had also been an older brother in his past life, and although he didn't have such a good relationship with his siblings as he got older, God knows he would have done anything for them. He could appreciate the man's concern. With his eyes fixed on the flames of a campfire, he looked around at what should have been a completely messy department store. How long has it been? 3 months? To be honest, Itadori had lost track of time with the training. It was a bit strange to him that so much had happened in such a short time. I love you, Marcus Walker. With his wife's face coming to mind, he froze for a moment, the fire's glow reflecting in his eyes, before he slowly pulled up his sleeve, revealing 6 triangular tattoos on his forearm. In Shibuya, he had used 4 miracles, leaving him with only 2. But that changed when, over the past few days, more of his memories were affected. Most of them were moments of ordinary luck, which really didn't change anything for him, but there were a few moments from his childhood that were also affected. This made him fear for his mental integrity. The feelings generated by crucial moments in his life were what had shaped his personality. The fear of getting in trouble with his mother for breaking something, the happiness of getting a good grade on a test, the nervousness of his first kiss, the sadness of losing his pet. The happiness of seeing the proud looks of his family when they saw him getting married. All of this is what had shaped Itadori as a person. He was afraid of losing that. No, to be honest, he feared it deeply. If he lost his individuality, would he still be himself? Tisk. He couldn't help but feel regretful. His greed had ended up taking over. What happened, brother? But snapping out of his own thoughts, his attention turned to the entrance of the store to see Choso walking towards him. Just thinking about everything. Nodding, Choso approached and sat in front of the campfire, his eyes always focused on his brother. Are you hungry? He asked, to which Yuji just shook his head. Thank you, but I'm fine. Picking up a stick, Itadori poked the embers, a sigh escaping his lips. Did you do what I asked? Choso nodded. That Zenin girl is already awake. She seems like she'll be fine in a few more days. As for the blonde. With the pause, Itadori immediately understood. After Shibuya, Maki and Nanami were treated right away. Thanks to her special body, Maki recovered well. It wouldn't take long before she could fight again. But Nanami was a different case. His skin and muscles had been burned, and his organs seriously injured, damage that Shoko's reverse energy had difficulty healing. He had been in a coma since then, and although he was out of immediate danger, the rate of improvement was so low that it was unthinkable that Nanami could return to sorcerer activities one day. But Itadori didn't worry about that. When he evolved his soul transfiguration technique to an appropriate level, he wouldn't hesitate to restore Nanami's soul form. He just hoped the sorcerer would hold on until then. The brown-haired girl asked about you. She and that Shikigami boy seem to be looking for you, Choso said, his gaze shifting to his younger brother's face in search of a reaction. But Itadori just shrugged it off. I'll meet them when we get rid of the troublesome curses around here. You need to learn to remember people's names. The only names I need to remember are my brothers. Itadori laughed at that. Right. Blinking as something came to mind, Choso turned to his brother. How's your progress with blood manipulation? Itadori paused for a moment. Since Itadori had partially recovered from the damage to his body, Choso had shown enthusiasm for teaching him blood manipulation. Itadori didn't hate the idea, but upon receiving the first lessons from his brother, he realized Choso was terrible at teaching. Fortunately, he was able to understand the use of the technique just by observing what Choso did, so Itadori saw no need to tell him. He was sure Choso would be upset about it. I managed to shoot it the last time I practiced, he said, but immediately regretted it when Choso smiled and grabbed his shoulders. Seriously? Damn, you should have shown me. I'm so proud. Eso and Akizu would be too if they were here. Itadori showed a nervous smile at Choso's excitement, discreetly pulling his hands off his shoulders. Thank you. But just as they seemed about to change the subject, their attention shifted when a crash sounded outside the store. And as they stood up in alert, they immediately noticed a massive foot stomping on the street, Itadori smiling at it. Looks like we've got a big problem. Clenching his fists, he let the cursed energy spread through his body. Certainly. Choso did the same, blood flying from his wrist and floating around him. Let's exorcise it.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.